Chapter 216. After living in hell for a long time, one's body would become numb from cultivation and would no longer feel pain. However, she was suddenly sent to heaven and tasted sweetness. Before she had enough, she was kicked down from the heavens. The pain was like numerous needles, each piercing deeply into her bones, making her unable to pull them out and unable to die. She could only cry and roll around in the dead of night, draining every drop of her tears. Lord Chi let out a crazy roar from between his teeth. So from then on, you planned your revenge and schemed to sneak into my Chi residence to kill my you-er? So what if I did? Mother Hui sneered and raised her head, fearlessly meeting his murderous gaze. With the same hateful gaze, she said, "Why should your child be able to trample on other people's lives at will, and still be able to peacefully enjoy wealth and splendor, while my child can only be bullied and defiled, dying tragically on the crowded streets? I waited for more than 30 years for a treasure and a home, but it was all destroyed by you. You didn't teach your own daughter well, and indulged her into becoming a devil. Then let me kill this devil. I've been suffering all these years, and now you've finally tasted it. Does it feel good? Lord Chi, do you feel good?" You. Lord Chi pointed at her angrily, his entire body trembling. Immense sorrow drowned him, making him unable to say a word. He only felt anger, absurdity, and confusion. Ning Shu said in a low voice, "You killed Leader Sun and Feng San?" In the pouring rain, Mother Hui laughed heartily, laughing so loudly. She was not afraid of everyone's gaze, nor was she afraid of the swords and spears in the hands of the imperial guards. She supported herself with one hand on the wet soil and staggered to her feet. "Yes, I killed them all. After I buried my with my own hands, I couldn't sleep night after night. Every time I closed my eyes, I seemed to hear my crying in my ear. He said that he was in pain, that his entire body was in pain, and that he died unjustly. As his mother, how can I not avenge him? The first person I found was the fourth young miss of the Qi family, who directly killed my By chance, I heard that the Qi family was looking for an etiquette instructor for her, so I used my former connections to find a way to get someone to recommend me to Lord Qi. From there, I successfully entered the Qi family and came to the side of this little murderer. I wasn't in a hurry to make a move. Instead, I quietly watched from the sidelines as I searched for news about Leader Sunday. As a woman, I can't compare to a man in terms of strength, so I have to wait for the best opportunity to make a move. I spent 3 years investigating Troop Leader Sun thoroughly. Then, I set up a trap and lured him to a desolate mountain alone. When he wasn't paying attention, I stabbed him in the throat with a knife and made it look like he was bitten by a wild beast. This way the authorities wouldn't suspect me. Then I continued to investigate and finally found that scum Feng San. After I drugged and tied him up, I asked him why he wanted to harm my Do you know what he said? He said, "Who told that bastard to take the initiative to run to his side and tell the stall owner that he wanted to buy 2 pieces of sugar cake." He looked fair and obedient, so it was easy to deceive him. If I didn't tie him up, who else would I tie up? When I heard that, my heart was about to break. That day, I realized that he had always been afraid that I would be worried when I was working outside, so he never went out alone. The only time he sneaked out was on the day he lost it. It was because he wanted to buy me my favorite candy cake because my birthday was on that day. Therefore, I returned everything that scum had done to my back to him. When I heard his miserable screams, my heart was filled with joy. Qi Dianyu was tied up by me and watched everything with her own eyes. She watched me peel off his skin and stuff it into his mouth. She watched me sew the wolf's skin inch by inch on his body. Sure enough, she was scared out of her wits. She went completely crazy. You all know what happened next, so I don't need to waste my breath. Today I finally avenged my If you want to kill me or cut me up, come at me. Haha, I'm not afraid. Chapter 217. The heavy rain continued to pour down, drenching the old woman. Her eyes were burning like a stubborn pheasant, welcoming death with its head held high. Ning Shu looked at her with a complicated expression. Her heart was filled with sour emotions, causing her to turn her head away. Tan Siwei's doubts were still not completely resolved. He frowned and asked, "If she did all these things, Then how did fourth Miss get burned to death just now? Even Lord Chi himself testified that Mother Hui was always by fourth Miss's side, and had no chance to do anything. Also, concubine Chi clearly poured water, so how did fourth Miss catch fire? I really don't understand this. Ning Shu said softly. I said that she did do something, but she wasn't the only one. This seemingly mysterious and strange thing actually only required the cooperation of 2 people. For Scythia, bring the golden spirit with the holy water, and let the officials smell it. For Scythia immediately did as she was told. An official with a sensitive nose quickly smelled something strange. He frowned and asked curiously, why does this golden spirit smell like garlic? It's not the smell of garlic but the smell of phosphorite. It's a very difficult thing to preserve, so it usually needs to be placed in water. Once exposed to the air and exposed to direct sunlight or high temperatures, it will spontaneously ignite and create sparks. The green willow. The wisps around the tomb on a summer night were caused by this thing. Moreover, this thing is white or slightly yellow. If it's placed in the golden spirit, it's hard to tell if it's in the water if you don't look carefully. At that time, the Taoist priest sprinkled a lot of cinnabar and black dog's blood around fourth Miss's body. Thus, it was an excellent camouflage. Tan Siwei thought for a moment and asked, but even if the phosphorite was sprinkled on fourth Miss's body and caused sparks, wouldn't the sparks be extinguished by the water that was sprinkled on her body at the same time? Then we have to mention the other arrangement that Mother Hui had carefully set up. Ning Shu brought over the copper plate that contained Qi Zhuanyu's charred flesh and clothes to His Majesty. My daughter was born with a sensitive nose. Just now, when I was examining fourth Miss's body, I suddenly smelled a little saltpeter on her body. After careful examination, I finally discovered the mystery. If my guess is correct, fourth young Miss clothes actually have a compartment that contains several kinds of things, namely quicklime, saltpeter, sulfur powder, and charcoal. When the water from the golden sage sprinkled down, the quicklime in the interlayer of the clothes immediately absorbed the water and released a large amount of heat, which in turn helped the phosphor stone to burn even faster. When the phosphor stone sparked, it immediately ignited several other things in the interlayer. When those things were mixed together, they were equivalent to a powerful piece of gunpowder. From then on, it was out of control, and the fourth young Miss was completely set on fire. I have to say, Mother Hui, you're too smart. When I went to the storeroom to look through the brocade boxes, you used a similar trick, didn't you? It's just that you've already used the same trick once. You really shouldn't use it a second time. When Ning Shu's voice fell, everyone couldn't help but be stunned. No one would have thought that such a vulgar and lowly-looking old woman would actually painstakingly plan such an unimaginable trick just to avenge her adopted son, who had no blood relations with her. Lord Qi muttered, it's her. No wonder when Zhuanyu got off the sedan chair. She deliberately put this piece of clothing on Zhuanyu. I thought she was worried that the altar would be too cold and cause Zhuanyu to catch a cold. So that's how it is. I actually allowed her to murder my daughter right under my nose. Lord Qi raised his hand and slapped himself hard on the face. He was sobbing uncontrollably as tears and snot flowed down his face. Mother Huey's face revealed a cold sneer. She silently raised her head and looked at the sky, as if her obedient and cute little one was smiling and waving at her from the sky. Chapter 218. Looking at this old woman who was like an ant, the emperor's eyes darkened. Everyone was silent. After a while, the emperor suppressed his anger and asked, then why did you frame concubine Qi? Mother Hui sneered. Concubine Qi is the Qi family's biggest support. Without her protection, how could Lord Qi have the guts to indulge his daughter to the point of killing people on the street? How could Qi Zhuanyu be so cruel and unreasonable, beating and killing her servants? Her Qi family deserves to be reduced to such a state. Shut up. How dare you? Wang Han looked at the emperor's expression and immediately reprimanded. Then who are your accomplices? Hurry up and tell us the truth. Mother Hui shook her head firmly. You don't have to look for them. There is no one else. I did everything alone. I spent 8 years to gain the trust of everyone in the Qi family. That day, after I helped Qi Zhuanyu into the hall to rest, I used the excuse of tidying up the silk satin to drug her, tie her into a brocade box, and drag her out. Then I took a soft pillow and stuffed it under the blanket to make it look like someone was sleeping. As for the hair that old consort you saw, it was a wig that I had prepared beforehand. After old consort you left, I took the opportunity to light the sleeping incense to knock out the other 5 people. Then, I secretly took out the wig and stuffed it into the washtub. Then, I restored the room to its original state. When the others woke up, I also pretended to wake up with them. It was a very short time, so no one suspected me. After the incident, the Imperial Guards turned the entire fragrant hall upside down, but no one thought to look for that stinky washtub. Naturally, I had plenty of time and opportunity to quietly deal with it. Ningxu knew that Mother Hui obviously wanted to take all the blame by herself, but there were too many flaws in her words. Ningxu couldn't help but sigh softly and say in a low voice, "Mother Hui, even if according to what you said, 4th Mrs. disappearance was caused by you alone, you are just an old palace maid who left the palace. What ability do you have to sneak into the Imperial Astronomer to be a ghost on the signature? Also, Feng San is tall and strong, and there is also Qi Zhuanyu. How could you deal with the 2 of them at the same time? Also, I roughly estimated that we would need at least 5 people to work together to replace Huajian in Weiyang Palace. If you don't have anyone to help you, you won't be able to complete such a huge plan by yourself." Mother Hui stiffened, but she still straightened her neck and said, "Feng San and Qi Zhuanyu, that's because I drugged them beforehand. Naturally, they didn't have the ability to resist. As for the Imperial Astronomer's divination stick, that was the will of the heavens. I was just following the heavens' will, and made another one to scare her. I've already said that this matter has nothing to do with anyone else. If you want to kill someone, then kill me. Then this king will kill you, you bitch." Hearing the news, Xiao Yunsu hurriedly rushed over. After visiting Imperial concubine Qi, he held a sword and angrily pushed through the crowd. Seeing that he was about to swing his sword and chop off Mother Hui's head, the guards beside him hurriedly stepped forward to stop him. However, they couldn't stop Xiao Yunsu from howling in grief and indignation. "My precious cousin actually died in the hands of a slut like you. And my Imperial concubine mother. Imperial father, I just went to visit Imperial concubine mother. She already can't recognize me. I beg Imperial father to tear her into pieces and kill all 9 generations of her family." Hurried gasps could be heard behind the curtain of rain. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. No one dared to make a sound. No one would have thought that after the previous 4th young miss of the Qi dynasty, that gorgeous concubine Qi, who was like an undefeated flower, would finally step onto the path of madness after personally burning her own niece to death with a cup of holy water. After Ningxu heard that Imperial concubine Qi was also delirious, the ominous premonition in her heart reignited. From the moment the Imperial Astronomer's divination revealed the appearance of the first divination stick, every event and every scene quickly flashed through her mind. She suddenly raised her head and looked at Mother Hui, who wasn't surprised at all. Her gaze then searched for another face that was as silent as water. From the beginning to the end, a total of 2 divination sticks had appeared. Didn't that mean Ningxu's heart thumped? She immediately said, "Your Majesty, Imperial concubine Qi might be in danger." Chapter 219. What? His Majesty's face turned green when he heard this. His bright yellow dragon robe flew in the wind. He immediately rushed to the quiet room where Imperial concubine Qi was temporarily placed. But before he stepped into the room, he heard a few terrified screams coming from inside. "Ah! Poisonous bees! Nyang nyang!" The head eunuch's expression changed. He immediately blocked in front of His Majesty. "Guards! Protect the Emperor! Imperial guards, go save Nyang nyang!" "Mother!" Xiao Yunsu roared and wanted to rush in. But he was knocked back by the eunuch who was running for his life. Ah! The quiet room was a mess. Countless poisonous bees buzzed and flapped their wings. They flew towards the palace maids and eunuchs who were serving inside. They stabbed their poisonous stingers into their flesh, causing them to roll on the ground and scream miserably. Some of them even died. There were even more poisonous bees that flew out from the open door and rushed towards the guards and officials. Ningshu picked up the corpse of a poisonous bee and carefully examined it. It really was a ghost head bee. Everyone in Xianqing Temple was in danger. Everyone was hiding and running for their lives as if they were in purgatory. Only in the heavy rain, Mother Hui laughed wildly. Ha 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 ha. Retribution, a retribution. Ha 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 ha. Ningshu turned to look at her and slowly pursed her lips. Her premonition was right. From the beginning to the end, there were 2 cursed sticks. They were not repeated threats. One stick represented Qi Zhuanyu, and the other one represented Imperial concubine Qi. Their goal had always been these 2 people. They would not let either one go. Use fire. Ningshu shouted with all her might. But the rain was too loud. Her voice had long been drowned out by the panic screams and cries. She bit her lower lip and quickly looked around. Soon, her eyes fell on the large basin of firewood in the middle of the execution field that had not been completely extinguished by the rain. She did not care about anything else. She immediately picked up a torch and covered her face with her sleeves. She burned it towards the door of the quiet room where the poisonous bees were still flying out. Before she could run to the door, the back of her neck was suddenly grabbed by a hand. A familiar voice sounded in her ear. It had a rare anger. Do you want to die? Or do you think too highly of yourself and think you have 9 lives? Ningshu turned around and saw that it was indeed Xiaoqing. She couldn't help but exclaim in surprise, Your Highness! Xiaoqing's face was calm and he ignored her. He pulled her behind him with one hand and said to the side, Huemo Jusi go. Huemo immediately took out 2 torches from the brazier and gave one to Jiusi. Then, he took out a bottle of wine from his arms and poured it into his mouth. He spat the small flame that was still wet from the rain. The flame suddenly burst into a raging fire. Pulling Forsythia, who was screaming in the crowd, to the side, Huemo raised his eyebrows and smiled. He and Jusi leaped into the air. Let's go! Some of the more brave and agile guards also started to learn from him. The noisy situation gradually came under control. By the time the Imperial bodyguards risked their lives to rescue Imperial concubine Qi, her body had already been pierced by several poisonous stings. There was even one on her face. The highly poisonous bee stings had pierced deeply into her cheeks, turning her flower-like face purple. She was as ugly as a ghost. Imperial concubine Qi covered her face and screamed crazily, My face! My face! The painful tears and snot completely trampled on her image as a beloved concubine. Xiao Yunsu went forward and hugged her. His eyes were blood-red. Quickly summon the Imperial physician. Quickly! When the last poisonous bee's charred corpse fell to the ground, the Emperor finally walked out of the circle of Imperial guards. He glanced around and looked at his embarrassed officials and his beloved concubine who had been poisoned. His chest heaved up and down violently. Who can tell me who did this? The surviving palace maid knelt on the ground and sobbed in horror. It's eunuch Jingzhong. When he was serving Imperial concubine Qi, he suddenly released a large bag of poisonous bees from his arms. It was too sudden. None of us expected him to do that. Where is that bastard now? Catch him for me. Here. But he's already. A eunuch, his entire body trembling with fear, pointed at Jingzhong, who was lying on his back in the corner, facing the heavens. A dagger had pierced deeply into his chest, and blood flowed all over the ground. There were also several wounds on his body from being stung by poisonous bees, but his face carried the most satisfied smile in the world. Chapter 220. Everyone in the palace knew that Jingzhong was Consort Qi's most trusted eunuch. No matter where she went, she would bring him along to serve her, just like her most loyal dog. However, no one had expected that this old dog would choose to perish together with its master in such a way. But why? There were tens of thousands of eunuchs and palace maids in the imperial palace. They were like ants in a crack in the wall. How much effort would a lowly and disabled eunuch have to spend? And how much luck would he have to accumulate before he could gain the favor of a queen in the imperial palace and become the head eunuch of the imperial palace? Especially when he was following Consort Qi, who had been favored for many years. For a eunuch, this was already a great blessing. How many people were envious? But this Jingzhong eunuch did such a foolish thing. Could it be that he had been possessed by a ghost? Amidst the sighing and confused discussion, Xiaoqing calmly opened his mouth and casually recounted Jingzhong's life. Jingzhong eunuch, originally surnamed Chun, was from the capital. When he was 12 years old, his father died and his mother was seriously ill. His family was poor and unable to continue, so he voluntarily entered the palace and became a eunuch. At first, he worked as an odd-job worker in the imperial kitchen for 3 years. Later, he offended the head steward of the imperial kitchen and was sent to the imperial horse park to clean horse manure. During an autumn hunt, he risked his life to save Consort Qi, whose horse had fallen from a fright. Because of this, he was recognized and served in the Qian Palace. After a moment of shock, Wang Han slowly came back to his senses. He asked in surprise, "Every year, there are many eunuchs who enter the palace for similar reasons. What does this have to do with him persecuting Consort Qi?" Xiaoqing curled his lips and lightly sneered. Before his family's accident, his ancestors had been running a tofu shop in the west of the city. You say it has nothing to do with him? Wang Han took a deep breath. Could it be that he actually... He didn't finish his sentence, but most of the people present were shrewd people. Just from these few words, they could guess the general situation. In the corner, Jingzhong eunuch's body lay facing the sky. His body had been stung by poisonous bees and pierced by blades. His body had also been trampled on when everyone was running for their lives. But the satisfied smile on his face did not fade even in death. Ning Shu quietly walked over, bent her knees, and gently closed his eyes that were not closed. Last night, she searched through the entire night and finally found the record of Mother Hui's adoption. Beside the record, there were a few rough notes about an Er's family background. It mentioned that he once had an elder brother. Therefore, Ning Shu immediately begged Xiaoqing to investigate further. Sure enough, they found something. The Chun family in the west of the city had made a living by selling tofu for generations. Although they were not rich, they were still able to get by. Until their father suddenly fell seriously ill and passed away, their mother was still pregnant. She washed her face with tears every day. Because of her grief, she fell ill during childbirth and had no money to treat her. Their younger brother was still in his infancy. The slender 12-year-old boy had no choice but to send himself to the palace in exchange for 20 taels of life-saving money to save the lives of his sick mother and younger brother. Unfortunately, his sacrifice didn't get him anything in return. His mother was bedridden for 2 years and finally passed away. As for his younger brother, he was lucky enough to be adopted by Mother Hui. In the end, he also died tragically on the streets. In the dead of night, he looked at his incomplete body and looked at the merciless moon and sky above his head. When he looked back, his enemy was living the most extravagant life in the world in the palace filled with flowers. How did this former boy spend every day and night in torment? He cried silently in the middle of the night. After dawn, he had to show the most respectful smile and kneel at the feet of his enemy to serve him wholeheartedly. He played the role of the most loyal dog to gain the trust of his master. Finally, after so many years of enduring, he had waited for this day. Chapter 221. Tan Siwei lowered his head and furrowed his brows. So you're saying that the cursed lot that the imperial astronomer divined a few days ago was also his doing? Ning Shu said. It should be him. But that day, there were a total of 8 people who followed Consort Qi's orders to collect the lot. How did he do something to the lot in front of everyone? Could it be that there's something wrong with the box? This is actually a very simple trick. Many trick stalls are proficient in it. It's hard to explain in a short time. Lord Tan, please bring out a locked box and I'll demonstrate it to everyone. Tan Siwei quickly ordered someone to bring out a brocade box. Ning Shu thanked him and opened the box in front of everyone. Your Majesty, please look carefully. She casually pulled out a hairpin from her hair and placed it in the brocade box. Then she said to Tan Siwei, Lord Tan, please personally close the box and lock it. Tan Siwei did as he was told, and the bronze lock clicked into place. Ning Shu said again, Lord Tan, please open the lock again. Tan Siwei nodded. However, something surprising happened. After the brocade box was opened, it was empty. The hairpin that Ning Shu had casually put in had disappeared like a puff of smoke. Ning Shu raised her sleeve and the hairpin that had disappeared magically appeared in her palm. Ning Shu said slowly, "Lord Tan, you casually found this box just now. I didn't have the opportunity to do anything to it. However, no one saw that when I was putting the hairpin into the box, I secretly wrapped a transparent thread around the end of the hairpin. It wasn't noticeable in the dark-colored box. Moreover, it was dark and raining heavily that night. Lightning flashed and thunder roared, causing people's hearts to palpitate. No one was able to discover that cobweb-like thread. When Lord Tan closed the box, there was a momentary blind spot. I immediately took the opportunity to pull out the thread. At this moment, my daughter was holding the brocade box for Lord Tan with both hands. My daughter's wide sleeves happened to cover the change that happened in that instant. When the box was closed and Lord Tan was busy locking it, he did not realize that there was nothing left in the box. My daughter had only practiced for a few short days. Eunuch Jing Zhong should have already made plans, so his movements would only be faster and more seamless than my daughter's. A similar method can also make an originally empty brocade box suddenly produce a talisman. At this point, the cursed talisman, the disappearance of the living people in the fragrant hall, and the burning of the cup of water were all solved. However, no one present felt happy. They only had mixed feelings. "Your Majesty, please save me. Queen Mother of the West, Jade Emperor, please save me. It hurts." Concubine Chi's screams of pain rang out beside their ears. It was heart-wrenching, and her image was completely destroyed. Many people who had been implicated for no reason were rolling on the ground in pain and wailing. His Majesty glared angrily at Jing Zhong's body. "The antidote. Go to that castrated man and find the antidote." However, even after the guards searched Jing Zhong's body, they still couldn't find any trace of the antidote. What about Mother Hui? Where is she? She is an accomplice. She must know. The guards immediately turned around to get Mother Hui. However, before they could touch Mother Hui's sleeves, they saw that she suddenly tore open the old fortune bag in her hand and stuffed everything in the bag into her mouth. Then, she smiled proudly at everyone, wiped her mouth, and fell to the ground with a plop. She foamed at the mouth and soon stopped breathing. Amidst the exclamations, Huiyemo immediately ran over to open her mouth and checked her neck and nose. He was stunned. Ning Shu hurried forward. What happened? What did she eat? Huiyemo looked at Mother Hui who had fallen into the black pond. Her face turned from green to purple, and finally returned to the black of death. Huiyemo was stunned and turned his head away. A lot of oleander powder and arsenic. One lick will kill her. She is already useless. Chapter 222. Wake up. You old thing. Wake up for this prince and tell me where the antidote is. Xiao Yunsu stabbed his sword towards Mother Hui's corpse to vent his anger, but Huiyemo blocked it without batting an eyelid. Ning Shu whispered, "Your Highness, she's already dead. Even if you cut her body to pieces, it'll be useless." Xiao Yunsu's veins popped out as he furiously roared. "Then what about my mother? You bunch of trash. Where's the imperial physician? Why hasn't the imperial physician come yet?" Imperial Dr. Zhang and Imperial Dr. Wang, who accompanied them, rushed over after hearing the summons. After checking the corpse of the poisonous bees on the ground and the poisoning symptoms of Imperial Concubine Qi, and more than a dozen other officials, cold sweat came out from their foreheads. Their faces looked very ugly. They looked at each other and swallowed their saliva. They trembled as they reported. "Reporting to Your Majesty, Your Highness. The poison that Imperial Concubine Qi and the other officials were poisoned with is something unique to the southern border. Ghost head bee. This bee is extremely poisonous. I've only seen it a few times in medical books, but I've never seen it before. I really can't cure it. Then immediately send someone to bring the antidote from the southern border to this prince." Cold sweat dripped onto the ground as the imperial physicians prostrated themselves on the ground and stammered. From the time this poison is poisoned to the time of death, the longest is 3 to 5 days, and the shortest is 20 hours. Imperial Concubine Qi's body has been stung by poisonous bees the most, and the poison has already entered her heart meridians. The distance from the southern border to the capital is several thousand li. In addition, the terrain there is dangerous and miasma blocking the way. I'm afraid that by the time the antidote arrives, Imperial concubine Qi and the other Darren will already have. Your Highness, please punish us. There were nearly 100 people who were poisoned and injured. After hearing the imperial physician's words, their faces turned ashen, and they let out a dying cry. Some of them were officials from the Supreme Court and Ministry of Justice who were summoned today to help solve the case. Some of them were palace maids and eunuchs who accompanied the emperor. There were also many Taoists from Xianqing Temple who were implicated. Even Lord Qi, who had just lost his daughter, was stung by the poisonous bee due to excessive grief. One of his arms had turned black. Ningxu looked at these desperate and empty faces, and her heart filled with complex emotions. She let out a light sigh and whispered to Xiaoqing, Your Highness, the person that my daughter asked you to find, have you found the whereabouts? Xiaoqing stood with his hands behind his back and slightly lowered his head in her direction. He coldly raised his eyebrows. What? Do you have doubts about my ability? As soon as Ningxu heard this, she knew there was hope. She hurriedly offered flattery and smoothed out this ancestor's anger. I wouldn't dare. Your Highness is smart and capable and extraordinary. How could my daughter dare to have the slightest doubt about Your Highness? This journey has been hard on Your Highness. I will remember this in my heart. Ha! Xiaoqing sneered in response to her deliberate flattery. He gently played with the finger bone in his hand and casually said, Juicy, bring the person over. Ningxu smiled and gave her thanks. Then she lowered her head and took a deep breath. Xiaoqing's clear and indifferent voice sounded in her ear. What are you afraid of? With me here, even if the sky falls, it won't smash you to death. Her heart that had been in the air seemed to have found a backer and landed steadily on a slow cloud. Ningxu couldn't help but curve her lips and raise her head. At this time, her eyes were clear as if they had just been washed by water. Her gaze was steady and powerful. She stepped forward and curtsied to the emperor. In a clear voice she said, Your Majesty, my daughter knows who has the antidote. Chapter 223. For a moment, countless pairs of expectant eyes landed on her. Bearing so many expectant and hesitant gazes, Ningxu's voice was like a green sparrow, flapping its wings powerfully. This humble daughter and His Highness the Crown Prince have already thoroughly investigated this matter. However, the details are closely related to the secret affairs of the imperial harem, and cannot be revealed to outsiders. Your Majesty, please allow the irrelevant people to leave, and this humble daughter will tell you the truth. The emperor narrowed his eyes suspiciously. However, the situation was urgent and there was no other choice. The emperor waved his sleeves and ordered the imperial guards to clear out all the irrelevant people present. The injured people were dragged into the surrounding rooms, and their eyes and ears were closed. Very quickly, only a few dozen of His Majesty's trusted aides and Xiao Yunce's group were left in the training hall. Old Princess Yu had experienced the terrifying storm just now, and was so frightened that her face was pale. She clutched her chest and coughed repeatedly. Thus she volunteered herself. Your Majesty, this old one originally wanted to come and help, but I didn't expect to encounter such a thing right after. Your Majesty, official matters are more important. This old one won't cause trouble here. His Majesty nodded and said patiently, Take care, Imperial sister-in-law. Xiaobin, personally escort Imperial sister-in-law back to the residence. Chief Eunuch Xiaobin immediately received the order. Just as old Princess Yu turned around, a gentle and clear voice sounded from behind her. Old Princess Yu, please wait. Old Princess Yu's footsteps paused. Looking at her old and haggard figure, Ningxu slowly said, Mother Hui and Eunuch Jingzhong have already taken their revenge, and the results you wanted have also been achieved. However, everyone else present is innocent, and should not be buried with your anger and hatred. Please take out the antidote. Old Princess Consort Yu slowly turned around and looked at her with her eyes that were muddled from old age. Aha! What are you talking about? What antidote? Why can't this old one understand? Or is it that this old one's eyes are really muddled and I heard wrongly? You understand. Ningxu's voice wasn't loud, but it was powerful. My daughter just said that this case was completed by a group of people from the beginning to the end. Among them, eunuch Jingzhong and Hui Mama have already surfaced, and Shen Xing, who tampered with the heir consort selection in Weiyang Palace, has already committed suicide. There's only one left, and also the most important one, old Princess Consort Yu, who was in charge of the entire situation. Old Princess Consort Yu couldn't help but laugh. Child, you are really joking. You suspected me just now, and I've already explained it clearly. Mother Hui, who died from poison, also said that she used a trick to deceive me. This case has nothing to do with me from the beginning to the end. Why would this old woman want to harm fourth young miss and consort Qi? Cough cough. Your Majesty, this old one's physical strength is truly lacking. Please forgive this old one for taking her leave first. Half of what you said just now is true. Your target has never been the fourth young miss of the Qi family. You assisted Mother Hui and eunuch Jingzhong in their revenge only as an exchange. The person you really want to kill is Consort Qi, because she once caused your death. Ning Shu said word by word. Your only daughter. Following Ning Shu's narration, old Princess Consort Yu's benevolent and loving expression cracked inch by inch and froze in place. She turned around and angrily shouted at Ning Shu. What nonsense are you talking about? Ever since I married into Prince Yu's estate, I've only given birth to 2 sons for the old prince. I've never had a daughter. Daughter of the Ning family, if you continue to speak nonsense, don't blame this old one for using my age and status to punish you for your disrespect. Chapter 224. Ning Shu, you have to pay attention to your words. Chief Eunuch Zhao Bin swept the tail of his spear and immediately reprimanded Ning Shu. The matter of the imperial bloodline is as important as Mount Tai and cannot be slandered. Furthermore, old Princess Consort Yu has a revered status. How dare you slander her so rudely? Quickly kneel down and beg for forgiveness. The imperial family was known as the imperial family because it had a supreme status, and the most precious bloodline in the world could not be mixed with anything else. Therefore, every child of the imperial family would be recorded in detail in the records of the Internal Affairs Department until their death. Old Prince Yu was the closest and most trusted elder brother of His Majesty. In the prince's residence, only the South Pacifying Prince's residence had a special status that could be compared to him. Every time Prince Yu's residence gave birth to a prince or princess, His Majesty would reward them greatly. Thus, everyone knew that old Princess Consort Yu had given birth to 2 legitimate sons for old Prince Yu. Unfortunately, both of them died while suppressing bandits. Every time His Majesty thought about it, he would feel sad. Why did Ning Shu suddenly mention a daughter today? Wasn't this hinting that old Princess Consort Yu's body was not upright? This was a great humiliation to both old Princess Consort Yu and Prince Yu's residence. This Ning family's eldest daughter was young, but her courage was bigger than a leopard's. However, everyone present silently raised their heads and secretly glanced at old Princess Consort Yu, who had fallen silent after her outburst. Everyone in the capital knew that old Princess Consort Yu had always been amiable and benevolent. She stood aloof from worldly affairs and treated everyone with tolerance. However, because of her excessive anger, she clutched her chest and gasped for breath. Her hands trembled like withered branches in the cold winter, and could be broken by a gust of wind at any time. Everyone present was His Majesty's trusted aides, and their mouths were tighter than the hardest rock in the world. However, this did not stop their brains from thinking, guessing, and doubting. Could this matter be? Everyone's hearts thumped and they hurriedly lowered their heads, not listening, not thinking, and obediently turning themselves back into a rock. This was the best way to preserve their lives. Looking at old Princess Yu's angry and embarrassed expression, His Majesty frowned and didn't say anything. He seemed to be deep in thought. Amidst this indescribable silence, Xia Hoqing calmly gathered his cloak and took a step back towards the corridor, not allowing the raindrops to splash on him. Then he said casually, "Your Majesty, the reason why rumors can run rampant in this world is because when they first started, everyone thought them to be ridiculous and laughable, not to be believed. So they put them at the back of their minds and ignored them. Little did he know that this gave it the opportunity to distort and expand. From Li Kuei to Li Gui, and from Ligui to a horrifying monster. Therefore, this official believes that rather than allowing this rumor to destroy the prestige of Prince Yu's residence, old Princess Consort Yu, and the late old Prince Yu, it would be better to explain it clearly today and completely extinguish the flames before it ignites. Your Majesty is wise and far-sighted, so you can naturally distinguish between right and wrong and return old Princess Consort Yu's innocence. After listening to Xia Hoqing's words, His Majesty pondered for a moment, and then nodded slightly. His gaze moved to Ning Shu. Then we will give you a chance. Remember, if there is a single false word or unfounded speculation, we will not tolerate it. Ning Shu bowed her head and thanked him respectfully. Thank you, Your Majesty, for your trust. I am willing to use my head as a guarantee that there is not a single false word in what I am about to say. Chapter 225. After bowing, Ning Shu raised her head and slowly said, Ever since I was a child, I have always listened to my father's teachings. What I heard the most was the principle of brothers working together through thick and thin. Because my father often used Your Majesty and the late old Prince Yu as examples, I have always remembered it in my heart and never forgot to practice it. Ever since Imperial Brother passed away 6 years ago, there are fewer and fewer people who still remember him. Especially in the past 2 years, there are very few people who have mentioned him. Among those few people, most of them are just trying to figure out what I'm thinking and trying to curry favor with me. I didn't expect your father to be such a considerate person. His Majesty sighed with emotion. Imperial Brother really treated me well. Please continue. Among them, what I remember most clearly is the rebellion of Zhao Wenzhong in Jingzhou 38 years ago. At that time, as the fourth prince, Your Majesty and old Prince Yu worked together to quell the rebellion. After going through countless difficulties and dangers, you finally defeated the rebels and saved the people from disaster. Every time I hear about it, I can't help but feel my blood boil. I only hate that I was born too late and was unable to experience Your Majesty and old Prince Yu's indomitable spirit. It is truly a great regret. His Majesty laughed and shook his head. That was the first time I led troops to quell a rebellion, and I met Zhao Wenzhong. That Zhao Wenzhong was the world's most arrogant and rebellious rat. He actually dared to declare himself as the divine Dragon King of Heaven's mandate. At that time, I was still young and hot-blooded. When I heard about it, I immediately asked the previous emperor for permission to quell the rebellion. However, I carelessly underestimated the cunning of that traitor and almost fell into his trap. After 3 days and 3 nights of bloody battle, more than half of the soldiers I led were killed or injured. The situation was urgent. That traitor arrogantly shouted from the city gate tower, saying that he wanted to capture me alive. At that critical moment, I didn't expect Imperial Brother to risk his life and charge into the thousands of soldiers and horses to bring me out of the encirclement. This gave me the opportunity to beat him at his own game. I lured him into the Chilean Gorge and caught him like a turtle in a jar. I took the opportunity to shoot an arrow through his head. The morale of the enemy troops immediately collapsed, and they fled like rats. After a few more days of encirclement and suppression, all the rebels were finally wiped out. When we cut off the head of the last rebel leader, there were 4 wounds on our body, and Imperial Brother had 5 or 6. But when we looked at each other and laughed, it was truly the best feeling in the world. Recalling the glory of the past, the Emperor's wrinkled face, which had been eroded by time, showed a strange radiance. It was as if he had instantly returned to his youth, when he was not afraid of death and was reckless and frivolous. Everyone was praising His Majesty for his bravery, but no one noticed that old Princess Consort Yu was clenching her fists so hard that her fingernails were digging into her palms. Ning Shu looked silently and finally had to say, I heard that old Princess Consort Yu also participated in that battle. The Emperor nodded and said, Imperial sister-in-law has always been brave, and she is deeply in love with Imperial Brother. Therefore, every time Imperial Brother went out to battle, Imperial sister-in-law would beat the war drums to boost the morale. Dressed in red, she looked valiant and formidable. She was praised by everyone back then. However, that battle was too tragic. In order to save Zhen, Imperial Brother accidentally separated from Imperial sister-in-law. Fortunately, There was a loyal subordinate who protected imperial sister-in-law all the way back to the capital and reunited with imperial brother. Otherwise, Jeanne would feel guilty for the rest of Jeanne's life. The emperor said apologetically, "Imperial sister-in-law, you were frightened that time. Old Princess Consort, you was like a withered tree on the verge of death." She was stunned for a moment before she regained her senses. Stiffly, she raised her head and squeezed out a dry smile. "Your Majesty, there is no need to be so polite. This old one is fine. Look, didn't this old one live well to this day?" After that, old Princess Consort, you did not participate in any battles with the army. She recuperated at the Yanyan Terrace for more than a year before returning to the capital. After that, she lived in seclusion and did not leave the residence unless it was necessary. She also did not see anyone until old Prince Yu passed away. Ningxu did not say much. In just a few short sentences, it was as if she had touched on the subject. But the hidden meaning within made everyone present shudder with fear and trepidation. Even the emperor's face suddenly changed. "Ha, this old one was frightened. What's wrong with recuperating at the Yanyan Terrace? As for whether or not to leave the residence, it is this old one's freedom. Do I need the permission of a silly girl like you?" Old Princess Consort, you clutched at her chest and panted rapidly. Every line on her face was taut to the extreme. She almost shouted, "Ningxu, what do you want to say?" "This humble girl does not want to say anything. I am just stating a fact," Ningxu said softly. "You did have a daughter for a short period of time. That daughter was unfortunately conceived in the chaos of war 38 years ago, and died in the palace 6 years ago. She was a literary talent." Chapter 226. Ridiculous. His Majesty was the first to utter this word. His Majesty subconsciously refuted Ningxu's assertion at the first instance. It wasn't that he didn't believe her words, but that it was too unbelievable. Too unbelievable. 6 years had passed, and when Chiron had never been favored by him. Therefore, his impression of that average-looking woman was like the wings of a butterfly, broken and blurry. If she wasn't Changping's birth mother, he probably wouldn't even remember who she was. He accidentally slept with her when he was drunk, and when he woke up, his first reaction was to frown. When he found out that she was pregnant, he had no choice but to make her a concubine and throw her into the harem. After that, the number of times he had slept with her could be counted with one hand. There were too many women like this in the palace. When he heard that she had died of an epidemic, it didn't even cause a ripple in his heart. He only casually ordered people to bury her, and then completely threw it to the back of his mind. He would never have thought that the ordinary and boring woman would be brought up today, and in such an unbearable way. If what Ningxu said was true, then what happened to old Princess Yu 38 years ago? My daughter's words may sound preposterous, but they are not without reason. It started from when 4th Miss and the 13th Princess fell into the water in the Imperial Garden. When 4th Miss fell into the water, she pointed out that the 13th Princess did it on purpose. The 13th Princess said that she suddenly saw a poisonous bee trying to sting 4th Miss, so she went forward to warn her. After that, I asked the 13th Princess in private, and found out the mystery of when Chiron's death. It turned out that when Chiron didn't die from the epidemic, but from the poison of the ghost head bee. After that, I boldly examined when Chiron's corpse, and found that the 13th Princess was not lying. Moreover, I also obtained an unexpected harvest. When Chiron's coffin had been opened not long ago and someone had put something inside. Ningxu gently took out the longevity lock that had been weathered by the wind and frost for more than 30 years, and presented it in front of everyone, including old Princess Consort Yu. Old Princess Yu's eyes were wide open as she stared fixedly at the longevity lock. It was as if she wanted to see through the longevity lock, and see through the sorrow that she had been trying to escape from for many years, but had never been able to. And that sorrow was mixed with the mournful cry of a baby. The meaning of something like a longevity lock is too extraordinary. Normally, it would be prepared by the biological parents for the babies they are pregnant with. When Chiron's parents had passed away long ago, how could someone suddenly pry open her coffin and put this thing in her heart? Thus I had a huge suspicion. But first, this conjecture was so bizarre that I didn't dare to believe it for a while. Second, other than this longevity lock, I didn't find any other sufficient evidence. Finally, the case of Wen Kai-ren and the case of the fourth young miss were intertwined with each other, making it difficult for me to understand. Until I figured out the secret behind fourth Miss's silent disappearance in Fragrant Palace. At first, I suspected that the 5 maidservants were in cahoots with Mother Hui, but later on, I rejected that idea. Because to succeed in this case, it wasn't something that could be done by a few lowly servants. There must be someone in a high position behind the scenes, providing help and cover for others. But who could this person be? Only you, whether it was the consort selection in Weiyang Palace, the appearance of the poisonous bees in the Imperial Garden, or the disappearance of Fragrant Palace. The one who witnessed all of this was you, old princess you. At first, my suspicion was, could it be that you set up this revenge to stand up for the 13th princess? But on the surface, you don't seem to have any blood relations with the 13th princess. It's just a few years of friendship, so it's not enough for you to take such a big risk. Then what could be the reason? Sometimes the most unexpected thing is the final answer. After figuring out the ins and outs of this series of cases, I immediately asked Xiahou Shitzi to help me find a person. And this person was the old mama who had always served you at Yin Yin Tai. Others might not know that you were pregnant, but it definitely couldn't be hidden from that mama's eyes. And right now, that mama is in a carriage outside Xianqing Temple. Old Princess Yu. Do you need me to invite her in for a meeting? No. Old Princess Yu almost screamed. She stumbled, and was hurriedly supported by the palace servants beside her. That pair of old and unfocused eyes suddenly rolled out large drops of tears. She tightly clutched her chest, as if she didn't do so, that old and unbearable heart would be vomited out of her mouth. No need. She forcefully closed her eyes, as if she was crying, as if she was laughing. She finally accepted the fact that she didn't want to face in this lifetime. Yiji is indeed my biological daughter. It's Changping, and also my biological granddaughter. Chapter 227. Looking at this old woman who had finally been defeated by her and admitted to all her crimes, Ningxu didn't feel very happy. Instead, she felt depressed, as if she was stuffed with cotton and couldn't breathe. She just wanted to let out a long and helpless sigh. Counting back 40 years, who in the capital didn't envy me for being the luckiest woman in the Great Yu dynasty? Even I think so. Old Princess Consort Yu sneered and pushed away the palace servant who was supporting her. She slowly walked to the end of the long corridor under the dark green banana trees, and tidied the silver hair that had fallen down her temples. She turned her head and looked at Ningxu through the branches and leaves of the banana tree. She used a hoarse voice to murmur. I was born in a prestigious family in the capital. Like you, I was protected by my parents since I was young. When the flowers bloomed, I married the most honest, kind, and brave man in the world. I easily obtained the thing that women in the world yearned for the most. Wang Ye was young and handsome. No matter if it was his appearance or temperament, he was the best among the men in the capital. Although he wasn't good with words, he treated me with gentleness and respect. It was all reflected in his actions and eyes. And it came from the bottom of his heart. I was protected since I was young, and had a very stubborn personality. Wang Ye tolerated me in all aspects and did everything according to my wishes. He almost treated me like a child and doted on me. At that time, I thought that I must have done a great deed in my previous life for me to meet such a good match in this life. Old Princess Yu spoke slowly, a dazed and fragile smile appearing on her face. It was as if she had flown back 40 years and turned back into a young and beautiful bride, nervously and expectantly sitting by the bed, waiting for her groom to pick up the scale and lift her veil. Very quickly, we had our first child. Not long after, we had our second. From then on, our relationship became even more sincere. In the words of others, it was like we were one person, inseparable and sweeter than honey. That was the best time of my life. His Highness had great ambitions. He was not bound to the imperial court, nor was he bound to the capital. He was bound to the common people. He said that he only has 2 wishes in this life. One is to protect our little family. The other is to sweep away the enemy and pacify the Koding country. To bring peace to the people and protect their family. Since you're going to the bloody battlefield, I'll beat the drum and wave the flag for you. In this life, we'll live together. Even if we die, we'll die under the yellow sand. Neither of us will abandon the other." As a result, His Highness was victorious in battle after battle. He said that as long as he thought of me behind him, there was only one choice left in his life: victory. Because he would never allow himself to see me get hurt in front of him. Over time, the story of us husband and wife working together became a story told by the common people. I thought that this story would continue until the rebellion of Zhao Wenzhong 38 years ago. Ning Shu couldn't help but say, Old Princess Consort. You casually waved her hand at her, indicating that since things had already come to this, what else did she not dare to say or face? Looking at the stunned emperor, a cold smile appeared on old Princess Consort Yu's face. Your Majesty is somewhat right. That Zhao Wenzhong is truly an arrogant and treacherous person with many tricks up his sleeve. From the beginning, he set up a series of schemes with the intention of coaxing our army into entering the competition. However, Wang Ye had been on the battlefield for many years, and quickly discovered the abnormality and pointed it out. However, Your Majesty was eager to gain merit for the first time, and didn't listen to Wang Ye's advice, and insisted on attacking the city. Wang Ye had no choice but to risk his life and charge into the city to lend Your Majesty a helping hand. However, what none of you know is that when he brought Your Majesty out of the encirclement, I was captured by the rebels and suffered the most unbearable humiliation in this world. Chapter 228. Drop by drop, huge teardrops rolled down from her eyes, as if she was being questioned by a slap. His Majesty opened his mouth, and was momentarily speechless. Old Princess Consort Yu sneered, her gaze returning to the empty space. She smiled and cried. He clearly promised me that he would never allow himself to see me get hurt in front of him. But when things came to it, he personally tore his promise to pieces. The moment the city gates closed, he clearly heard my shouts and even turned his head, but in the end he still led Your Majesty out of the city gates. Between his family and the country, he chose the country. Between his wife and his brothers, he chose his brothers. It's not that I can't understand the choices he made, but what I can't understand is why I have to bear all the bitterness and filth by myself. 3 days. For 3 whole days, I tried my best to hide. The last bodyguard by my side died, but I still couldn't escape from the claws of those beasts. In one night, I went from being the luckiest woman in the Great Yu dynasty to being trampled into a pool of disgusting mud. Until General Wen Ye led his men to find me, I had also thought about whether I should just end my life with a white silk. But General Wen Ye and his wife were indeed good people. They promised me that they would never reveal this secret to a third person in their lifetime, and would treat it as if this matter had never happened. Thus I hesitated. With this hesitation, the white silk had already been cut by Madame Wen. A few days later, I returned to the capital. At that time, the prince and his Majesty had also successfully eliminated the rebels and returned to the capital. We had a tacit understanding, and no one mentioned anything about what happened during the chaos. It was just that every time it was late at night, the nightmarish scenes of the past would haunt me, causing me to be unable to sleep at night. The prince noticed my abnormality, so he probed me to see if something had happened. How could I answer? Say that your princess consort was trampled on in the chaos of war, and her chastity was lost? In that case, the glory of Prince Yu's residence and the face of my mother's family would be reduced to a laughingstock. Even my Chung, and Yu, would find it difficult to establish themselves in this world. Therefore, I could only lower my eyes and smile as I said to him, Too many people died in that battle. I was scared out of my wits. In the future, I won't dare to go onto the battlefield again. I'll rest in the manor like the other madams and wait for your return. His Highness hugged me lovingly and agreed. To make it up to me, he treated me even better than before. Slowly, I purposely forgot about the shadow. I thought that the nightmare would finally end, and I would be able to wait for the day of rebirth. But I didn't expect that 2 months later, when I was drinking a bowl of mutton soup, I suddenly vomited. At that time, I realized that I might be pregnant. Ning Shu said in a low voice, So, after that, You used the excuse that you weren't feeling well and moved to the Yen Terrace to recuperate. Old Princess Consort, you nodded in self-mockery. That's right. At that time, I didn't know what to do and was in a panic. I didn't dare to call any doctor to take my pulse. Otherwise, my secret would have been exposed. At the same time, I still had a trace of hope in my heart. What if this child wasn't the traitor's, but His Highness? But I couldn't be sure. If it wasn't, when the truth came out, how could I face His Highness? How could I face the world's gossip? Therefore, I couldn't tell anyone about this matter. I could only tear it to shreds, chew it up, and swallow it into my stomach. Then I moved to the Yen Terrace. Using the excuse of cultivating my body, I didn't bring many maidservants with me. I also used all sorts of excuses to avoid meeting His Highness. I couldn't tell anyone about the depression and sorrow in my heart. I could only secretly tell Madam One. She gave me an idea. She said, after the child is born, secretly take a drop of His Highness's blood to test for paternity. If it was His Highness's, naturally everyone would be happy, and there would be no worries. If it wasn't, she and Wenya had been married for many years and didn't have a child. She was willing to raise it for me. As the child grew up day by day, my stomach also gradually swelled. Although I kept trying to convince myself that this child might be His Highness's and that I couldn't abort it, it would be too late for regrets. But in reality, I had already sensed it. It was just that I kept lying to myself. It was as if as long as I didn't admit it, that filthy thing never happened. Old Princess Consort Yu's voice was too sorrowful. Ningxu couldn't bear to interrupt her. Until old Princess Consort Yu's empty gaze fell on the banana leaf in front of her. After a long silence, Ningxu said softly, "So you secretly went to the silversmith shop to make a longevity lock for her?" "That's right. Actually, I had hesitated. If it wasn't His Highness's biological child, but the unfilial child from that day, should I just strangle her to death? But that was a piece of soft flesh that grew out of my stomach. Whenever I thought of killing her with my own hands, my chest hurt so much that I couldn't breathe. I hated her, but at the same time, I felt guilty towards her. Because what did all of this have to do with her? Coming to this world was probably a calamity for her. So I thought for a long time and decided to go to the silversmith shop to make a longevity lock for her. After she was born, she was destined to be abandoned by me. That longevity lock could be considered my only wish for her as a mother." Chapter 229. However, I didn't expect that before the longevity lock was set, I would give birth to her prematurely. When I saw her face clearly, I knew that my dream had been shattered. She doesn't look anything like Your Highness. Instead, the birthmark on her ear is exactly the same as one of the bastards who humiliated me that day. With a snap, the banana leaf in old Princess Consort Yu's hand was crushed into pieces by old Princess Yu. When I saw her, the nightmare of that night came back to me with a sinister smile. I didn't even want to look at her a second time, and immediately begged Madam One to take her away. From then on, she had nothing to do with me. After that, I rested at Yen Terrace for 2 months and returned to the prince's residence. I didn't leave the house and lived the life of a noble lady that I used to despise the most. As for the child that represented my humiliation, I completely threw her to the back of my mind. Madam One kept her promise and never came to disturb me again. I also deliberately avoided any news from the One family. Until one day, I suddenly heard that Lord One and Madam One had died of illness one after another. That child was sent back to her hometown in the countryside. After a few years, I heard that she was sent to the palace as a palace maid. In all those years, I always knew about her. I knew that she was looked down upon and treated as a servant. I knew that she was favored by His Majesty and gave birth to a princess. However, her life was even worse than before. However, I never interfered with her. I didn't even see her once. Because I didn't dare. Because I didn't want to. Because she was a thorn in my heart. Her life was poisoned. Who told her to come to this world and throw herself into my stomach? She deserved it. She deserved it all. Ha ha ha, listen to this. Which child in this world is more unlucky than her to have such a vicious birth mother like me? I always cursed her in my heart, hating that she shouldn't have come to this world. Then my curse came true and she really died. She died from the ghost head bees that imperial concubine Qi gave her, and she died because of my indifference. Perhaps even the heavens couldn't stand it anymore, and wanted to punish me. Not long after her death, the prince suddenly died of illness. Following that, my Cheng-er and Yu were ambushed while suppressing bandits and were pierced through the heart by thousands of arrows. It was as if all the people I cared about had died overnight. Not a single one was left alive. I was the only one left in this huge mansion. Every day, I wandered around like a lonely ghost. Look, I got my retribution. This is my retribution. Ha ha ha. Old Princess Yu laughed crazily. Her laughter was hoarse, but Ningxu wanted to walk over and hug her, asking her to stop crying. You hate her, but at the same time, you are also secretly loving her. The laughter stopped abruptly as old Princess Consort Yu denied. Nonsense. How could I love her? I only hate her. Complete and utter hatred. If it wasn't for her, His Highness and I wouldn't have ended up treating each other with respect and treating each other so coldly. My entire life has been ruined by her. Ningxu's eyes reflected her deliberately ferocious face. She slowly shook her head. If there is only hatred, then after her death, why did you take the risk of your secret being discovered, and take the initiative to ask His Majesty to bring the 13th princess to your side for education? If there is only hatred, then why did you set up such a big plan to take revenge on the Qi family and imperial concubine Qi? Shen Xing, Mother Hui, Eunuch Jingzhong. There are so many people. It is impossible to find out their secrets and gather them together in 3 to 5 days. I'm afraid that you have been secretly planning for many years for today. Also this longevity lock. If you didn't pry open one Siren's coffin, and place this longevity lock in her heart, I wouldn't have been able to connect it to the events of the past. Everything you are doing now is compensation. Compensation for all the things you had to do in the past. How should a mother treat a child that she didn't welcome? This question was too difficult and too complicated. Ningxu couldn't answer it, nor could she empathize with it. She only felt her heart ache and her stomach churn. Chapter 230. At this point, the truth was revealed to the world. The emperor was shocked by wave after wave. He couldn't help but stare blankly at the scene, speechless. Was the cause of all these tragedies really that unlucky baby girl from back then? No, it wasn't. Then who was it? Could it be? No, he was the emperor, the destined emperor. An emperor wouldn't make any mistakes in his life. That's right. Everything was planned by me. Every step and every nail in the arrangement was carefully selected by me. Even these ghost head wasps were collected by me and given to Jingzhong. Does your Majesty want the antidote? Wiping away the tears on her face, old Consort Yu raised her head. At this moment, she no longer had any secrets. It was as if she had been freed. She said without fear. Then your Majesty, please give the order to kill Consort Qi. At the side, Xiao Yansu, who had been listening quietly, suddenly raised his head and said angrily, Trap! This is a trap. What do you mean my mother killed Wen Chiron? Nonsense. Imperial father, please don't listen to other people's instigation. Consort mother has never harmed anyone. If she has the ability, let her take out the evidence. Lord Qi also knelt down and shouted, My Qi family has been loyal to the imperial court and contributed everything. Your Majesty, please investigate. The emperor frowned. He might be concerned about their old relationship, but that was mainly his relationship with his elder brother, old Prince Yu. But no matter how great the relationship was, old Prince Yu was already dead. In the end, it couldn't be compared to his court. After weighing the pros and cons, His Majesty finally said, Imperial sister-in-law, you are making things difficult for me. You said that Consort Qi killed Wen Chiron. Then do you have evidence? If you don't have evidence, I have no reason to issue this imperial edict. Old Princess Yu sneered. At this moment, her face was brimming with a carefree smile. It was as if she had returned to the legendary princess consort from 30 years ago, who was dressed in red and fearless, standing on the city gate to cheer for the emperor. His Majesty's beloved concubine might be very patient. How could she allow the evidence to remain? Since your Majesty can't bear to kill her, then it doesn't matter. Anyway, if we can't get the antidote, that woman will die anyway. Then your majesty, please wait. When the time is up, your beloved consort and your officials will die together. I don't mind dragging a few more people down with me. Old Princess Yu's decisiveness was equivalent to publicly falling out with His Majesty. The consequences. As expected, His Majesty's face quickly darkened. Ningxu worriedly stepped forward, wanting to persuade old Princess Consort Yu. A hand pulled her back from behind. Xiaoqing pinched her arm and whispered in her ear, "So far, you've done everything you can. What happens next is not something you can control." But his clear and calm breath brushed past her ear. "There are no buts. Old Princess Consort Yu has already passed the age of heavenly mandate. She naturally knows what she wants. I also know that if you continue to interfere in this matter, you should be worried about your little life. Stand aside, I'll do it." After pulling Ningxu behind him, Xiaoqing stepped forward and asked Old Princess Yu calmly, "Old Princess Yu, if you were given a choice, did you really want someone to stop you when you picked up the white silk 38 years ago?" "What do you mean?" "Nothing, I just have a doubt. Humans seem to be naturally afraid of death. But between life and death, which is the boundless hell? And Old Princess Consort Yu, what do you really want?" Xiaoqing's voice was extremely calm, like a frozen pond without a single ripple. However, it caused Old Princess Consort Yu's eyes to reveal a moment of confusion. Looking back at the half of her life that was immersed in the dark swamp, Old Princess Consort Yu couldn't help but stagger as she muttered to herself, "That's right, sometimes living is even harder than dying. Compared to the endless torture, death was much more satisfying. I almost let her off easy. Not only should I not want her to die, I should let her live. Living miserably and soberly is the ending she deserves." Chapter 231. Xiao Yansi stared fixedly at the scene, and could see the subtle change in Old Consort Yu's attitude. He shouted angrily, "Xiaoqing, what are you doing?" Xiaoqing tilted his chin in his direction and said slowly, "I'm saving your highness's mother's life. There's no need to thank me." Xiao Yansi was instantly enraged. "You." Meanwhile, Old Princess Consort Yu, who was deep in thought by herself, also had a final answer in her heart. She laughed coldly and said in a clear voice, "I can spare Consort Chi's life, and I can also hand over the antidote for the ghost head bees. If your majesty doesn't agree, then this matter will be dropped. As for the antidote, I will throw it all into the mud. I'll have to trouble your majesty's beloved concubines and important officials to accompany me to the Yellow Springs." Xiao Yansu immediately said, "Imperial father, you can't agree to her request. She must be plotting against Consort Mother." His fists were tightly clenched and the veins on the back of his hand popped out. If it wasn't for the antidote, he would have killed Old Consort Yu to vent his anger. Unfortunately, he didn't have the upper hand right now. Plotting against her? Old Princess Consort Yu sneered with her eyes half closed. "If I really wanted to harm her, it would be very simple. I would just waste time with you all until she dies from the poison. Wouldn't it be enough to cure her? What was the point of doing so? Don't worry, I won't kill her. I just want to say a few words to Consort Chi. After that, I'll take out the antidote and personally cure her." After she finished speaking, Old Consort Yu closed her eyes and didn't say another word. Time passed by slowly. The cries of the poisoned people came closer and closer, causing His Majesty's face to become increasingly tense and gloomy. Finally, he made a decision. Waving the wide sleeves of her bright yellow dragon robe, Old Consort Yu finally opened her eyes and revealed a joyful smile. She solemnly tidied her hair and robes that had been messed up by the wind and rain. Under the watchful eyes of the palace servants, she slowly walked into Consort Chi's room. No one knew what she was going to say. Step by step, she slowly walked towards Consort Chi, who was screaming in pain from the poison. Behind her, the emperor's muffled voice sounded, "Sister-in-law, think about Chongping." Old Princess Consort Yu's body became sluggish, as if she was tired. She bent down and coughed heavily a few times, coughing until her face turned pale. Only then did she stand on her tiptoes again. "Your Majesty actually used your own daughter to threaten me. You are truly wise and divine. Please rest assured, Your Majesty, I will do as I say. I will definitely not leave a wound on her body. Under everyone's nervous and wary gazes, old Princess Yu walked to Imperial Concubine Chi's side. She lowered her head and looked at her quietly. Using a voice that no one could hear, she whispered something into her ear. Then, she smiled and took out a bottle of pills from her sleeve to stuff into Imperial Concubine Chi's mouth. Their breathing was so quiet that they could hear each other. Xiao Yunsu immediately rushed forward and pushed old Princess Consort Yu away. He looked at his mother anxiously and saw that the bruises on her face that had been stung by the poisonous bees were fading away at a speed visible to the naked eye. She spat out a large mouthful of black blood and her complexion started to look better. Your Majesty, the poison has been cured, Zhao Bin reported excitedly. Old Princess Consort Yu snorted coldly and handed over all the antidotes on her body. Zhao Bin immediately took them and ran to the imperial physicians to distribute the antidotes to the other victims. Everyone secretly let out a sigh of relief. Even His Majesty's complexion was slightly better, but his brows were still tightly knitted. He still hadn't decided what crime to punish old Princess Consort Yu for and how to punish her. In the next moment, Xiao Yunsu's eyes suddenly widened. His gaze landed on the side of Imperial Concubine Chi's neck, and he shouted in alarm. What is this? Imperial Father! Imperial Father! Ning Shu subconsciously restrained herself, and quickly stepped into the quiet room. Imperial Concubine Chi, whose complexion had just improved, suddenly felt her throat bulge as she spat out another mouthful of blood. Following that, her entire body began to convulse. On the side of her snow-white neck, a faint color slowly appeared. Then more and more of it gathered and formed the pattern of a plum blossom. Ningshu sucked in a cold breath and clutched her chest. Plum blossom kiss. This was plum blossom kiss. Chapter 232. Ningshu immediately turned her head and looked in the direction of old Consort Yu. Old Consort Yu smiled secretly. Live well. Live in the fear of every day and night. Live in the fear of death every day and night. Live in the anxiety of every moment, every snap of a finger, every second. Living a life worse than death. Live to your heart's content. And I can finally have a good rest. After she finished speaking, she closed her eyes tiredly. Her heart skipped a beat. Ningshu instinctively had a premonition and dashed over. However, she was too fast. Before she could even touch old Princess Consort Yu's sleeve, she saw a trace of black blood flowing out from the corner of her mouth. Amidst everyone's chaotic cries, she fell to the ground with a plop. Ningshu immediately rushed over and pressed old Consort Yu's acupoints, Quanzu Chengqi and other acupoints. Huiemo, quick! Unfortunately, after a moment, Huiemo looked at the silver needle that had turned completely black from head to toe. He silently shook his head and said in a low voice, It's the same as Mother Hui. It's also the powder of oleander. It's hidden in the medicine pouch under her tongue. As long as you bite it lightly, the poison inside will immediately flow into your throat. It's useless now. Ningshu stared blankly at the old woman in front of her. Her body twitched a few times in pain, but there was a smile on her lips. Just like that, she slowly lost her breath. No one would have thought that a case that started from a small piece of paper would end up like this. The emperor let out a few muffled breaths. His gaze constantly sized up the various expressions of fear on everyone's faces. His gloomy eyes reflected Xiao Yunce's anger, Xia Hoqing's contemplation, Ningshu's long eyelashes drooping, and finally stopped for a long time on old Consort Yu's face and the strange red plum that suddenly appeared on the side of Consort Chi's neck. He paused for a long time until everyone felt uneasy. Only then did he lower his voice and say slowly, Come, pass down Zhen's decree and announce to the world. The Yellow Sky sect conspired to revolt and burn the Qi family's fourth young Miss Qi Zhanyu to death with sorcery. They also released the ghost head bees in an attempt to harm Zhen. Old Princess Consort Yu unfortunately died in order to save Zhen. The world mourns her death. Imperial Concubine Qi was framed and poisoned in the chaos. Zhen promoted her to Imperial Concubine Gui to appease her. In addition, the Imperial Academy of Medicine must do their best to help Imperial concubine Qi recover as soon as possible. They must not slack off, otherwise, they will be punished even more. His sharp eyes narrowed. This matter ends here. No one is allowed to say a single word about what happened here today. Otherwise, you will be going against me and against the Imperial Court. I will execute all 9 generations of his family. Everyone lowered their heads and kept quiet. Other than obeying the Imperial edict, no one dared to utter a single word. The bright yellow dragon robe flicked his sleeves and left, leaving Zhao Bin and the others to clean up the mess. Lord Qi's throat went mute and he could no longer utter a single word. The emperor had already promoted Imperial concubine Qi to Imperial concubine Gui. Although this Imperial concubine Gui had already gone mad and no longer had any practical use, she was still an Imperial concubine Gui. She was His Majesty's unparalleled gift, and was also a stone to shut the Qi family's mouth. In a daze, he brought Qi Zhuanyu's charred corpse back to his residence, and chose a day to bury it. Mother Hui and Jingzhong were thrown to the Supreme Court like dead dogs. Tomorrow afternoon at the market, they would be treated as evil cult members, and their corpses would be whipped in public as a warning to others. When old concubine Yu's corpse was carried away, a drop of black blood dripped from the corner of her mouth. Unknowingly, the rain had already stopped. The heavy rain just now had left many small puddles on the ground. The shallow puddles reflected the clouds and the sky above, making them look like jade. That drop of blood fell into one of the puddles and slowly dyed the blue jade into a pool of dark red. Ningxu stood in place and stared at the puddles, speechless for a long time. She didn't feel the slightest bit of joy and satisfaction from solving the mystery of the case. Instead, her heart was filled with faint sighs and melancholy. Xiahou Qing's voice came from beside her. The case has already been solved. What are you still standing here for? Let's go. Ningxu was stunned. When she regained her senses, she followed Xiahou Qing's footsteps. After not hearing her reply for a long time, Xiahou Qing said, "Why aren't you saying anything? Are you still letting your imagination run wild?" Illusory and resolute figures flashed through her mind one after another. Ningxu said softly, whether it was Shen Xing, eunuch Jingzhong, Mother Hui, or old concubine Yu, they were all prepared to end their own lives before today's incident. Chapter 233. A drop of rainwater on the banana leaf slid down the veins of the leaf and landed on Ningxu's cheek. She reached out to wipe it away and sighed slightly. Although their revenge is almost complete, the price is still too high. No merchant in this world was willing to make a loss, but they did. The compensation was 1-4. It was so tragic. Even though Imperial concubine Qi had gone crazy, the Qi family had received the title of Imperial concubine, and the emperor's pity. On the other hand, Mother Hui and Jingzhong had to bear the infamy of being a traitor, and be whipped in public. Could this really be considered a result? Xiahou Qing said softly. No matter what happens after they die, at the moment of their deaths, it can be said that their long-cherished wish has been fulfilled, isn't it? Ningxu blinked and pondered for a long time with her eyes lowered. Then she suddenly understood. That's right, they had planned for so many years and waited bitterly for this day. Regardless of whether it was hatred or guilt, they had all been comforted today. As for the soulless remains of a body after death, what difference did it make whether the body was burned to ashes or burned to ashes? The greatest fortune in life was to ask for benevolence and obtain benevolence. The gloominess in his chest dissipated without a sound. Ningxu let out a long breath and raised her chin to look at the man beside her. She suddenly asked curiously, "Your Highness, aren't you anxious?" "What's there to be anxious about?" After the excess emotions were swept away, Ningxu quickly regained her rationality. She quickly went through the series of events that had just happened. The plum blossom kiss appeared again. According to the situation at that time, the poison must have been placed on Imperial concubine Qi by old concubine Yu. But before I could ask any questions, old concubine Yu had already committed suicide, and the clues were cut off. Now, if we want to wait for the next clue, I'm afraid we'll have to wait a long time. Furthermore, this wait is very likely to come to nothing. It was truly too confusing. Could it be that the person who had used the plum blossom kiss to control the situation was old concubine Yu? But this didn't make any sense. If it was old concubine Yu who had poisoned Imperial concubine Qi, it was understandable. After all, Imperial concubine Yu had killed Imperial concubine Yu 6 years ago. But why did old Princess Consort Yu want to harm her and Xiaoqing? There was no enmity between them, and they were completely unrelated to each other. What reason was there for her to spend so much effort on this matter? Also, how did she manage to give Consort Qi a kiss? At that time, there were so many pairs of eyes watching. Old Princess Consort Yu walked in front of Consort Qi and bent down to whisper a few words in her ear. Then, she took out the bottle containing the antidote and casually poured out a pill to feed Consort Qi. Could it be that the antidote was added to the poison? But why was it that everyone else was fine after taking the antidote, but only Qi Fei was poisoned? How did old Princess Consort Yu ensure that she would be able to find the only pill that had been tampered with? Questions popped in her head like firecrackers, filling her with confusion. She wanted to examine old Princess Yu's body to see if she could find any clues, but His Majesty had ordered the chief eunuch, Zhao Bin, to take over the funeral and no one else was allowed to interfere. She watched helplessly as the clues passed by her twice. She couldn't help but feel anxious. After listening to her narration, Xiaoqing nodded and seemed to have realized something. Anxious? Ningxu raised her eyebrows. Just as she was thinking, this is the normal reaction that a human should have. It's not like a living person to be so calm. Then, she heard Xiaoqing continue. So you can immediately investigate the secret of the plum blossom kiss and help me find the antidote. Chapter 234. Ningxu was at a loss for words. No. If she still had some suspicions before old Princess Consort Yu was exposed, then when she received this unexpected answer, her entire being was in a mess and her mind was in a mess. Xiaoqing curled the corner of his mouth and gave his response. Ningxu instantly fell silent, and she lamented over her incompetence. Xiaoqing could hear her speechlessness and the smile on his lips deepened. After a moment he continued. Do you think it's old Princess Yu? Ningxu thought for a moment and shook her head. No. Do you still remember when we were investigating the Phoenix Terrace case, the third prince's trusted aide forged a letter from your father? I remember. In addition, when Wei Yong Palace was selecting concubines, someone also forged a letter that was almost identical to His Highness's handwriting. Now that the truth is out, it was old Princess Yu who ordered someone to do it. Xiaoqing asked. Even so, you still don't think it's her? Ningxu pursed her lips and said quickly, I can't give an accurate reason, it's just a feeling. From the moment I stepped out to expose her, to the moment old Consort Yu committed suicide, I met her gaze many times. In her eyes, I saw coldness, nervousness, uneasiness, despair, relief. There were countless emotions, but I didn't see any hostility from the start. Unless she acted too well, and didn't let me find out. But since she wanted to die, why would she hide it? Whether it's from my feelings or the analysis of the motive, I feel that the person we have been looking for is not old Princess Yu. Xiaoqing said. But there must be some kind of secret relationship with her. Ningxu agreed with this point. Yes. This poison is too special. Even the previous emperor died because of it. It's impossible for too many people to be involved in such a big mystery. So if we continue to investigate old Princess Yu, we should be able to find some clues. But the problem came back. Old Princess Yu's corpse was in Zhao Bin's hands. And His Majesty's attitude just now clearly showed that he was very secretive about the plum blossom kiss. Otherwise, he wouldn't have given such a verbal order. The water here was too muddy. Ayaya, it was really a headache. Xiaoqing silently turned the bones in his palm a few times. Then he raised his chin and signaled Ningxu to follow him into the carriage. Let's go. Where are we going? Xiaoqing calmly said. Huiyamo hasn't played horseplay for a while. Don't you think so? Being called out for no reason, Huiyamo was confused. Ningxu was also surprised for a moment, then she immediately reacted. She curved her eyes and revealed a sly smile. Yes, I haven't played for a long time, so I'm really itching. The three of us can't sit at the same table, so we have to disturb Prince Ku and ask him to fill in the vacancy. Although old Consort Yu's corpse was in Zhao Bin's hands, but for such a big matter like the burial of old Consort Yu, there would definitely be people from the Ministry of Rites helping to arrange it. And wasn't Prince Ku the head of the Ministry of Rites? It was really embarrassing to have to trouble him again. A few miles away, Prince Ku, who was lying in Xiao Hongyan's arms and eating grapes, suddenly felt an itch at the tip of his nose and he sneezed loudly. He got up in confusion and looked at the closed window and the crack of the door. There was not a single gust of wind coming in. But why did he feel a gloomy chill? As if he was being watched by someone? He suddenly shuddered. Not good, not good, this is very bad. Chapter 235. Inside Fu Ning Palace Hall. With a paw sound, a porcelain bowl filled with medicine was smashed to the ground by the emperor with a flick of his sleeve, shattering into pieces. Take all of these away for Zhen. They're completely useless and extremely bitter. Zhen has already said that I won't drink a single mouthful. Yet you keep bringing them over to be an eyesore. Are you deliberately trying to make Zhen even more unhappy? The emperor stood up from the dragon throne and glared at the servants in front of him. His face was filled with thunderbolts. The ground was immediately filled with people kneeling, trembling as they begged for forgiveness. This servant doesn't dare. But the imperial physicians. Imperial physicians, what dogs hit imperial physicians? They're all a bunch of trash. The poison of the ghost bees can't be cured. Imperial concubine Qi's illness is also at a loss. Even Zhen's head illness has not been alleviated after drinking so much of their medicine. Instead, it's getting worse, causing Zhen to have headaches and sleepless nights. They really can't do anything, so they're the number one in kowtowing and begging for forgiveness. Zhen will definitely drag them out one day and behead them all. The emperor was furious to the extreme. His vision turned black and his legs swayed, almost causing him to fall. He grabbed onto the armrest of the dragon throne, causing himself to fall onto the bright yellow and cold throne, so that he wouldn't lose his dragon face. Is your majesty's head illness acting up again? A gentle and graceful voice followed the master's footsteps into the palace hall. Empress Chao waved her hand to dismiss the kneeling palace servants and walked to the emperor's side with a smile. This concubine has just learned the art of massage. Let this concubine give you a massage. Perhaps you'll feel more comfortable. As she spoke, Empress Chao took off the golden armor on her hands one by one. Just as her soft fingers touched the emperor's temples, he suddenly opened his eyes and grabbed Empress Chao's hand. He raised his head and looked at her with bloodshot eyes. Empress, the plum blossom kiss is back. Empress Chao let out an ah in a low voice. Her hands trembled, but she quickly calmed down, steadied her hands, and continued to massage. She deliberated and said, "Could it be that your majesty was mistaken, or that someone deliberately set up a trap to create panic and deceive your majesty?" The emperor's face was filled with exhaustion. No, this time this emperor saw it with his own eyes. That plum blossom petal appeared on imperial concubine Qi's neck out of thin air. This emperor just ordered the palace servants to check it out. Imperial concubine Qi's sense of taste has already disappeared. There's no doubt it's that damn thing. But why did imperial sister-in-law have to use this poison? And where did she get this poison? I really don't understand. Previously, in the Phoenix Terrace case, the imposter also used this thing to murder the young master of the Yun family, Cloud Leaf. However, that imposter was unwilling to tell the truth until her death. Now that damn thing has appeared again, and this time, it's even more arrogant. It actually dares to appear in front of me so openly. If it's not challenging my dragon might, then what is it? There must be someone secretly plotting all of this. Because he hadn't slept for many days and had personally experienced the series of events at Xianqing Monastery, the emperor had a splitting headache. His gaze fell on a certain point in the air, and he suddenly gripped the dragon throne's armrest tightly. His throat was almost hoarse as he said, "Empress, imperial father died from that poison ah." Empress Chao gently patted the back of his trembling hand that was bulging with blue veins. She gently comforted him. Since the young master of the Yun family was able to recover, it means that there's an antidote for that poison. It's not as frightening as we imagined. Your Majesty, don't worry. You are the destined emperor, the chosen one. Ah. Under Empress Chao's comforting voice, the emperor gradually calmed down. The empress is right. This emperor is the chosen one, and will not fall to the same fate as imperial father. Since we've found out that it was imperial sister-in-law, then we should cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. All the servants in Prince Yu's estate are granted the grace to be buried with imperial sister-in-law. This emperor doesn't believe that there will be a fish that escapes the net. In addition, that lass from the Ning family knows too much. Moreover, that thing has appeared several times with her. That woman is very unlucky. Your Majesty means. The emperor nodded and rubbed his swollen temples. He lowered his eyes. I'll have to trouble the empress. Empress Chao was stunned for a moment. Then she said, this concubine obeys the emperor's decree. The walls of the palace were very thick and blocked out all the sounds from inside. No one knew that just a few words from the emperor and empress had already decided the life and death of a bunch of people, including Ning Shu, who they were just talking about. Only a gust of wind spied on the heavenly secrets outside Fu Ning Palace. It spun around quietly and drifted far away. It drifted to the most prosperous east city in the entire capital. It then passed through the bustling crowd and drifted to the tallest and most popular building in the city. Chasing Clouds and Chasing Moon Pavilion was as lively as usual. In a private room on the second floor, Ning Shu was concentrating on the card game in her hands. Chapter 236. In the hall downstairs, Bai Xiaoxing was surrounded by a circle of tables. Bai Xiaoxing was talking about the violent death of Qi Zhaoyu in Xianqing Temple. Everyone was listening with great interest, even forgetting to eat their melon seeds. After their true identities were exposed, the two evil cult members suddenly started chanting incantations. Under their summoning, countless poisonous bees flew over from the horizon, almost covering half of the sky. They rushed towards His Majesty and the other officials present. That scene, ayaya, simply made one's legs tremble, and one's stomach turn cold. Old Princess Consort Yu was standing beside His Majesty at that time. She immediately stood in front of His Majesty to protect him, but unfortunately, she was bitten by the poisonous bees. His Majesty was filled with grief and anger. A purple gold dragon light burst out from his body, burning all the poisonous bees to ashes and taking down the two people on the spot. Unfortunately, old Princess Consort Yu was old and weak. Before she could be treated, she died from the poison. Bai Xiaoxing shook his head and sighed. It really makes people cry out in grief. Everyone was also filled with emotions and smacked their lips. One of them suddenly asked curiously, "Is the evil cult's magic really so powerful?" The person next to him who was eating melon seeds said, "Otherwise?" Fourth Miss Qi's body was burned to charcoal. Consort Qi was scared out of her wits on the spot. There were also many officials who were poisoned and carried out of Xianqing Temple. If it wasn't evil magic, what other explanation could there be? But his words were quickly refuted. If they were really so powerful, why didn't they save themselves in the end? Instead, they committed suicide out of fear of punishment. I saw the notice. His Majesty ordered that their bodies would be whipped at the Meridian Gate tomorrow, and left to rot for 3 days. The person who was eating melon seeds blushed and hurriedly said, "You don't know. This is called the golden cicada shell shedding technique." On the surface, it looks like the two of them committed suicide by taking poison. In reality, the two bodies are just their shells. They were discarded after they were used. As for their souls, they had already flown beyond the 9 heavens and escaped to heaven. Seeing that the two of them were about to quarrel in public, another middle-aged man wearing brocade clothes said, "You two are really simple-minded. You are so easily fooled. In fact, the real situation is not what you think." Hundreds of curious eyes looked at him, greatly satisfying the middle-aged man's vanity. He coughed a few times and deliberately lowered his voice to say, "My brother-in-law sells herbal tea outside Xianqing Temple." According to what he saw with his own eyes, other than His Majesty and the officials of the Ministry of Justice, there was another person who went in and out of Xianqing Temple. Do you know who it was? Who? Don't keep me in suspense. Tell me who it is. Duke Ning's eldest daughter Ning Shu. Ah, why is it her again? Why did she go to Xianqing Temple? Could it be that he's there to solve a case? Stop joking around. Who in the capital doesn't know that she's just an embroidered pillow, an idiot among women? If you want me to believe that she has the ability to solve the case, why don't you tell me that in reality, all of this was done by her own fate of being a jinx? With the help of her identity as the reincarnation of a celestial fox, it's easy for her to summon some poisonous insects and bees. As for the motive, I've heard more than once that fourth young mistress Qi was disrespectful to Ning Shu at the entrance of the Yun residence, and was given a resounding slap by Ning Shu. Since then, the two of them have formed a deep grudge. I also heard that when she was young, she greatly offended Consort Qi. Oh no, Imperial Consort Qi. That's right. Third young Master Qi was also killed by her. There are more twists and turns in this than we think. If she wanted to kill Qi Zhanyu, she should have done it long ago. Why wait until now? Also, why did she target the consort selection of Shizi Xiahou? The reason is too simple. Her third husband, the Cloud Leaf young master, encountered an accident and also returned home to recuperate. She is now in urgent need of a new husband. Who in the capital do you think is a better candidate than Shizi Xiahou? The onlookers who thought they had seen through the secrets of the heavens took a deep breath and looked at each other. They came to two conclusions at the same time. This Ning Shu was really a powerful character. If they saw her in the future, they would have to take a detour. Also, Shizi Xiahou was really unlucky to be chosen by this woman who could jinx her husband. Ning Shu was speechless after being smashed into a pile of mud for no reason. She deliberately left a deep impression on people that she was an idiot, but she didn't expect to hit herself in the foot. Was this a success or failure? Under Prince Ke's interested gaze, she quietly raised her eyes and wanted to glance at Xiahou Qing, but she interrupted herself and silently focused on the game in front of her. Last time, His Highness Prince Ke said that if she wanted to play with him, she should play with her real ability. Otherwise, even if she won, she wouldn't win happily. However, how could she let others pay for her help? Moreover, in a game of cards, if Prince Ke really lost too badly, although he didn't say it, he would definitely be unhappy in his heart. Therefore, there was a mystery in this. She couldn't let herself lose too obviously and dampen Prince Ke's mood, but she couldn't let him lose money. Ning Shu kept calculating in her heart. If she won a small round in this game and lost a big round in the next game, she would have 7 wins and 5 losses. Although it seemed that she won more often, in fact, the money would fall into Prince Ke's pocket more. She was concentrating on the small abacus in her heart and didn't see that Xiahou Qing suddenly raised his eyebrows thoughtfully when he heard the discussion downstairs. Chapter 237. Play to the best of my ability. I played to my heart's content today. As expected, after a few rounds of mahjong, His Highness Prince Ke looked very happy. He patted his money pouch as if he had not played to his heart's content. If it was not for the fact that it was already dark, he would have played 3 more rounds. He smiled as he pointed at Ning Shu. Little girl Ning, you must know that playing mahjong is like going to the battlefield. You cannot only care about the small benefits in front of you. You must consider the big picture, and always remember that you cannot be arrogant. For example, in the last round just now, you originally had a chance of winning. However, you were too anxious at the crucial moment. You were too eager to win and went for wool but came home shorn. Ning Shu frowned and smiled bitterly in annoyance. She stood up and sent Xiao Minglan out of the private room with Xiahou Qing. That round just now was indeed my daughter's fault. His Highness Prince Ke is right. My daughter will remember. However, it's still all right. Although this prince won money, you are still better than me in terms of winning percentage. It can be considered a tie. Not bad, not bad. Ha 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 ha. All right, I have played to my heart's content today. This prince will return to the residence first. You don't have to send me off. Xiao Minglan waved his hand and stopped them. He walked down the stairs under the guidance of the servants. After keeping the official seal of the Ministry of Rights in her sleeves, Ningshu smiled and prepared to send the old man off with her eyes. Xiao Minglan had just taken 2 steps when he suddenly turned his head and asked curiously, "That's right. When we were playing mahjong just now, this prince heard the people downstairs talking about the case of Xianqing Temple. You took a fancy to Namping Wang's heir and planned it. Is it true?" Ningshu, ha 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 ha, this prince was just joking with you. How could this case be done by you? However, why is your face red? Could it be that you really took a fancy to Namping Wang's heir? Originally, Ningshu's face was not red. However, when this old man in his early 30s said that her face was red, the corner of her mouth twitched and she turned her face away speechlessly. Don't be shy. One of you is unmarried, and the other is about to get married. One of you has just lost your future wife, while the other has lost her 3rd husband. There's no one else in the entire capital who is more compatible than you two. Are you sure you don't want to consider it? Xiao Minglan looked at the 2 of them and teased them. The mole under her eye was especially vivid. The blush on Ningshu's face deepened, and she couldn't help but say in embarrassment, "Your Highness Prince Ke. Ioyo, I already said that I was just joking. Why did you take it seriously? All right, I won't tease you anymore. I'm going back now." Xiao Minglan laughed heartily when he finally got the reaction that he had been waiting for. He went downstairs in satisfaction. Ningshu let out a long sigh of relief after the devil incarnate had really left. She quickly raised her hand and fanned herself a few times to cool down the inexplicable heat on her face. Ningshu cleared her throat and turned around, pretending to be relaxed as she said, "Haha, Your Highness Prince Ke really likes to joke." Really? However, she didn't expect that Xiaoqing was standing behind her. When she turned around, she almost bumped into his arms. She subconsciously retreated, but forgot that there was a staircase behind her. She stumbled and almost fell down, but was caught by a hand in time. She raised her head in shock. All she could see was his jade-white face, his handsome nose, and the almost perfect curve of his chin. Her heart unconsciously skipped a beat. The temperature on her face that had just gone down seemed to be rising again. Moreover, this trend was as steep as climbing a mountain. She was stunned for a moment and quickly steadied herself. She escaped from his palm and stood at the same level as him. After his palm was empty, Xiaoqing gently pinched the tip of his finger and took it back. His eyebrows were still wrinkled as he said, "Impudent." Ningshu awkwardly rubbed the tip of her nose and said, "This little girl will definitely pay attention next time. Many thanks to Your Highness for saving this little girl's life again. Anyway, it's already late. Your Highness must be tired from running around today. How about you go back to your residence early and rest? This little girl will respectfully send Your Highness off." Her waist that was grabbed by him just now felt like it was on fire. She smiled and bowed, wanting to quickly end this awkward situation. However, she saw that Xiaoqing was as steady as Mount Tai, standing in front of her motionless. "Do you want to see?" He suddenly opened his mouth. A wisp of wind came in from outside the open window, and slightly lifted the end of the brocade cloth that covered his eyes. Ningshu blinked her eyes and didn't understand. "Eh? See what?" His voice was low and smooth, like jade and jade. "Last time you said that if you can successfully solve this case, you want to see my eyes." Chapter 238. The floor below was filled with people. Some were marveling at how high the standard of old Princess Yu's funeral was, but for some reason, she would not be buried in the same grave as old Prince Yu. Some were discussing how Southern Yan's envoy had come to the capital to ask for the princess's hand in marriage. His Majesty seemed to have sent the 13th princess for political marriage. Some were whispering that imperial concubine Qi had personally witnessed her niece die an unnatural death, and that her mind was not normal. The discussion was lively. Upstairs, only 2 zhang away, Ningshu's stunned eyes clearly reflected Xiaoqing's calm face. Her palms couldn't help but heat up and sweat seeped out. She had always boasted that her face was as thick as a mountain, but at this moment, she actually felt a rare sense of helplessness. This sense of helplessness came too unexpectedly, making it hard for her to deal with. She had always been clever and had an outstanding memory. Naturally, she remembered that not long ago, when she sat in his carriage in a half-conscious state, she had boldly made a request. She just didn't think that he would really come to fulfill his promise. "Do you want to see?" These 3 words beat back and forth in her heart like a rattledrum, urging her to make a decision. Should she look or not look? Should she nod or shake her head? If she shook her head, it would seem that she was guilty of something and didn't dare to look into his eyes. But if she nodded, it would seem that she really coveted his beauty. If she had known that her careless words would cause her to fall into this situation, she would have sewn her mouth shut at that time. She was racking her brains to think of the best response. His hand had already reached over. First he vaguely grabbed her shoulder, then slowly moved down her shoulder to her elbow and wrist. Finally he pinched her wet and warm palm and simply pulled it over. The black brocade was as smooth as water silk. With a gentle lift, it fell to the ground like a piece of black hair. At this moment, her heartbeat forgot the rhythm of her heartbeat. Time slowed down to the extreme. Ningshu opened her eyes wide and slowly looked at the pair of eyes that slowly appeared under the brocade. It was as expected. His long eyelashes were as black as ink, and his eyes were like dots of lacquer. With just a glance, one would feel that the world was magnificent. Half of it was condensed in those eyes, making one's heart beat faster. Unexpectedly he felt heartache. He felt heartache that such a beautiful pair of eyes lacked the supreme elegance that they should have. Shock and regret mixed together, making Ningshu stunned and speechless for a long time. After not hearing her voice for a long time, Xiaoqing frowned slightly. "What's wrong? Is it ugly?" He let go of Ningshu's hand, turned his face to the side, and motioned in the direction of Huimo to pick up the brocade and cover himself again. He mocked himself. "Are my eyes as lifeless as those of a dead fish?" Ningshu came back to her senses and hurriedly said, "No, Your Highness misunderstood. It's very beautiful." She paused, then solemnly repeated, "Your Highness' eyes are very, very beautiful." She lowered her head and pondered seriously. Moreover, such heavenly eyes, such an otherworldly person, shouldn't be damaged by anything, not even the plum blossom kiss. If she raised her head at this moment, she would discover that Xiaoqing seemed to be pleased by something. The corners of his mouth rose, revealing a slight smile. It was like the first dragonfly flying across the pond in summer. Every shallow ripple was gentle. After leaving the chasing cloud and moon-chasing tower, Ningshu rode in the carriage of Prince Nanping's residence, and stopped at the entrance of the Duke's residence. Jumping down from the carriage, Ningshu turned around and said, "Tomorrow, Huimo and I will disguise ourselves as officials from the Ministry of Rights, and see if we can find an opportunity to examine old Princess Yu's body. Therefore, I will have to trouble Your Highness to lend Huimo to me. In addition, who was old Princess Yu's close friends when she was alive, and where she often went. I will have to trouble Your Highness to send more people. The plum blossom kiss in her hand can't appear out of thin air." Chapter 239. The first person to die from the plum blossom kiss was none other than the previous emperor. If old Princess Yu was the one who had the plum blossom kiss from the start, then the one who benefited from the poisoning of the previous emperor wasn't Prince Yu's estate or her, but Jin Sheng, who had indirectly caused her tragedy. This didn't make sense. Therefore, someone must have given her the poison. That person might have even been secretly encouraging her to take revenge for Wen Chiron and herself, and provided her with many conveniences. For example, the expert in imitating handwriting who had been involved in 2 cases, but never revealed his true identity. According to Xiaoqing's investigation, after the third prince, Xiao Yunyan, fell from power, a strategist in his estate, who was usually dressed in gray, disappeared without a trace. Xiao Yunyan later confessed that the strategist had given him many suggestions and bewitched him. Even the seeds of the 100 charm incense were brought by that strategist. That strategist had obviously been hiding in the third prince's estate for many years. His master had been imprisoned and was waiting to be executed, but he had escaped unscathed. This was obviously a trap set up around Xiao Yunyan, using his vigorous ambition to plot against him. That's right, the 100 charm incense was even used on the beauties presented to His Majesty. Ningshu couldn't help but feel a chill run down her spine when she heard this. A strategist who had just surfaced had such great ability and caused such a huge disaster. Then what kind of powerful person was the one who was controlling everything behind the scenes? Previously, she had analyzed with Xiahou Qing that the plum blossom kiss in Yu Zhao's hands should have been obtained after she entered the palace. Then who was that person hiding in the palace? From Xiahou Qing to her, Ningxu, Xiao Yinyan, and then to Consort Qi. The goals of the people behind the scenes were many and varied. It made one unable to make heads or tails of them. At the same time, it made one feel as if there was a blade at one's back. She had to be faster. Otherwise, no one would be able to predict what would happen next. Perhaps it was for the dignity of the imperial family, or perhaps it was to make up for the tragedy that had indirectly caused old Princess Yu's life. His Majesty ordered that old Princess Yu's funeral etiquette was almost the same as that of the old concubine in the palace. In the past, old Princess Consort Yu loved to host all kinds of banquets in the huge Prince Yu's residence. She would invite the nobles of the capital to join in the fun. However, at this moment, the place was covered in mourning. The laughter of the past had been completely replaced by mournful music. Due to the unexpected death of old Princess Yu, there was no set of clothes prepared beforehand. Thus, the Ministry of Rites hurriedly sent someone to measure the size, so that they could quickly sew it day and night. This was to avoid delaying old Princess Yu's funeral, and making His Majesty unhappy. Ningxu and Hui Mo blended into the crowd, and followed the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rites into Prince Yu's residence. As if they had already foreseen the outcome of being buried with old Princess Yu. The entire residence was filled with cries of grief. Only one person dressed in mourning clothes knelt quietly in front of old Princess Yu's coffin. She did not move and only stared blankly at the brazier in front of the coffin, where old Princess Yu's coffin was placed. In a single night, this beautiful princess was forced to grow up in solitude. In the past, even though she had lost her mother, she still had someone to rely on. She could still pretend to be arrogant in front of others. However, from that day onwards, even though she had the title of princess, there was no one who could protect her anymore. And this girl would never have the chance to know how much her own grandmother had endured, and how much she had protected her. Ningxu lowered her head slightly and sighed softly. She walked past Xiao Zhangping, and took out a soft measuring rope. After kneeling in front of old Princess Yu with Hui Mo and 2 other officials from the Ministry of Rites, she stepped forward to measure old Princess Yu's body. Chapter 240. Because the weather was getting warmer, they placed a circle of ice basins around the coffin to lower the temperature for fear that old Consort Yu's body would rot. Ningxu shivered when she approached the coffin. In addition, the bottom of the coffin was covered with a thick layer of lime to prevent moisture. Ningxu and Huimo looked at each other, and started to work. Naturally, they couldn't use a knife on the body and could only roughly examine the surface. They had to be careful and fast. Fortunately, Huimo was experienced in this area and Ningxu was covering for them, so they didn't attract anyone's attention. When they were done, Ningxu and the others bowed and knelt before leaving. When they were about to leave, the palace sent a mama over. The elderly mama looked at the mourning around, and then looked up and down at the mourning dress that Xiao Zhangping insisted on wearing. She frowned and thought for a while before persuading her patiently. 13th Princess, His Majesty has summoned you back to the palace. There are so many things waiting for you to do in the marriage alliance. You should hurry back with us. What are you waiting for me for? Xiao Zhangping didn't raise her head and said stiffly. In your eyes, in Father Emperor's eyes, I'm just a puppet with an empty body. I'm just waiting for the time to come so that I can be carried out of the palace alive to Southern Yan. As for the rest, you can do whatever you want. I don't care. Go and tell Father Emperor. I accept my fate. I don't have any other thoughts. I just want to accompany old Consort Yu for a few more days before she is buried. From the shock and disbelief she felt when she heard the news yesterday to today when she saw old Princess Consort Yu's corpse, she was in a daze. She was still in a dream and refused to believe that everything that was happening in front of her was real. But whether she believed it or not, the only old woman in the world who could make her lie on her knees and act coquettishly had completely left her. The mama said awkwardly, But the marriage alliance is a joyous event. If you keep staying here, I'm afraid it will affect your happiness. It will be very inauspicious for you. Also, you are a princess. Only the concubines in the palace can wear this mourning dress when they are dead. Your dress is really not in accordance with the etiquette. If His Majesty knows, he will punish you." Her words directly angered Xiao Zhangping. She raised her head and laughed, but it was uglier than crying. "Punishment? Punish him. From the moment I was born until now, other than my imperial mother and old Princess Yu, no one has ever taken me seriously. Imperial father has never even hugged me since I was young. Now that he needs someone to marry him, he suddenly remembered that he has a daughter like me. The southern Yan kingdom was 1,000 miles away, and once they left, they would not be able to return. Was there a heavier punishment in this world than this? If you do, feel free to call me over. I, Xiao Zhangping, will be waiting." These rebellious words frightened everyone present to the point that they knelt on the ground, not daring to say a word. Ningxu deliberately slowed down her footsteps and looked at her with pity. She couldn't help but think of herself in her previous life. 372 people in Duke Ning's household were beheaded one by one in front of her. She held her father and mother's corpses tightly and wailed loudly. However, someone kindly reminded her not to cry out, otherwise she would provoke the emperor's displeasure and be punished again. At that time, her state of mind was no different from Xiao Zhangping's now. She wanted nothing more than to accompany her loved ones to the Yellow Springs, but she couldn't. That mama was frightened by Xiao Zhangping's rebellious words and hurriedly reprimanded. Your Highness the Princess, you don't dare to say that. This is rebellious. Your Highness should quickly follow this servant back to the palace and ask for forgiveness from the emperor." Before that mama could finish her words, a small stone suddenly hit her knee, causing her to kneel down with a "Io." She prostrated herself on the ground and cried out in pain. Seeing this, Xiao Zhangping felt a little better. After sneering, she ignored it and continued to stand vigil for old Princess Yu. She lowered her head and suddenly found a small ball of paper in front of her. It came out of nowhere, as if it had fallen from the sky. She picked it up and opened it. When she saw 9 words written on it, her tears fell like rain. May my Zhangping be free for the rest of her life. Chapter 241. When old Princess Consort Yu took the poison to commit suicide, she didn't say anything else. She only said the last 9 words to Ningxu, who was closest to her. She was trapped in the shackles of Princess Consort Yu for her entire life. Every day, she tried her best to pretend to be the most respected princess consort in the world, while stepping on her real self. Every day felt like a year. Her only daughter was trapped in the cage-like harem, and was bullied until she died. Thus, she didn't have any other wishes. She only hoped that her most cherished granddaughter could obtain the most luxurious freedom, because that was the dream that she had been trapped in for 38 years. What did you find? After leaving Prince Yu's estate, Ningxu used the excuse of leaving the Ministry of Rights team, and pulled Huimo to a hidden corner. With so many pairs of eyes watching, I couldn't investigate in detail. Thus, I could only make a rough guess. I didn't find anything related to the plum blossom kiss. I only found a wound on her finger. It seemed like she bit it herself. I don't know why. In addition, her lower limbs were swollen and her organs were as hard as rocks. There were many purple scars on her arms and neck. This means that old Princess Consort Yu was seriously ill when she was alive. Even if she took medicine every day to save her life, she probably wouldn't live past this autumn. The last bit of doubt in her heart was solved. Ningxu finally understood. No wonder she was in such a hurry to take revenge. Even if she revealed a flaw, she wouldn't care. Because if she didn't hurry up, she wouldn't have another chance. At this moment, old Princess Consort Yu's soul should have passed through the gates of hell, and stepped onto the road to the Yellow Springs filled with red spider lilies. Then was she satisfied now? She would only know the answer when she saw her in the future. Ningxu thought for a moment and said, "Can you detect the poison from where she bit her finger?" Huimo spread out his hands. "No, I secretly used a silver needle to test it. There was no abnormality. Perhaps she was too angry and bit it in a fit of anger." She's already dead. No one can say for sure what the reason is. After working for half a day, this result was within Ningshu's expectations. However, she still felt disappointed. It seemed like this was destined to be an unsolved case. Ningshu thanked Huema and said goodbye to him. During this period of time, her whole body was tense. No matter how flexible a rope was, it would break after a long time. She had to take a break first before thinking about other ideas. She yawned and returned to her residence to rest. Forsythia considerately massaged her shoulders and waist, making her feel so comfortable that she almost fell asleep. Just as he was about to take a half-hour nap, someone suddenly knocked on the door of the public house. A sharp voice interrupted Ningshu's beautiful dream. Her Majesty summons Miss Ningshu of the Ning family to the palace for an audience. Hearing the news, Princess He Xian rushed over. She hurriedly gave a signal with her eyes and ordered a servant to bring a heavy embroidered pouch, which she stuffed into the hands of the imperial edict eunuch. She said with a laugh, "Dare I ask Gong Gong, do you know why the Empress Nyang summoned my daughter? My daughter is young and clumsy, so it's better for me to be prepared in advance, so as not to offend your highness." In the past, the imperial edict eunuch would always accept the embroidered pouch, but today he put on a professional posture and threw the embroidered pouch on the ground. Humph, how could I dare to guess the Empress Nyang's thoughts? The Phoenix Imperial Decree summons Lady Ning, so Lady Ning should just go. Is there a need to explain the reason to you? I advise you not to let the Empress Nyang wait for too long. He Xian's heart was soaked in cold water. Ningshu patted her mother's hand comfortingly and said with a smile, "Mother, don't worry. The Empress Nyang is benevolent. Daughter will definitely come back safely." She whispered a few words in He Xian's ear, and finally coaxed Ningshu to let go of her hand. She followed the impatient eunuchs into the palace. It was still the Phoenix Algae Palace, the same place Ningshu had knelt before. She tidied her skirt and knelt on the ground. "My daughter Ningshu greets your highness." The Empress Nyang sat on the phoenix chair, and casually waved her hand to have her rise. She looked at her with a warm smile. "Guess, why did Ben Gong summon you into the palace today?" Her expression made Ningshu think back to that cold night. Empress Chao had come in a carriage and looked at her as she climbed out of the lotus stream, and said those words. That bone-chilling coldness slowly crawled back to her back. Ningshu lowered her eyes and said, "Asking Nyang to forgive my daughter for being stupid and not being able to guess." Empress Chao smiled and ordered people to bring the prepared items in front of Ningshu. She said generously, "Since you can't guess, Ben Gong won't make it difficult for you. But you have to guess the next riddle carefully. Look at the 2 cups of wine in front of you. Guess which of the 2 cups of wine is poisoned and which isn't." Chapter 242. This was the place where the crazy Empress Zhou had killed the crown prince of the previous dynasty. Ningshu stood here once again. There were 2 cups of fine wine in front of her. The light pink wine gave off an alluring sweet fragrance. On the phoenix chair, Empress Chao looked at Ningshu and said slowly, "Guess which cup is not poisoned. Drink that cup. If you are lucky enough to guess correctly, Ben Gong will let you walk out of this Phoenix Algae Palace unharmed. If you guess incorrectly, then don't blame Ben Gong. Also, don't think that someone will come to speak for you this time. Ben Gong has already ordered that no one is allowed to take half a step into the Phoenix Algae Palace. It's a 50-50 chance. Whether you live or die, it's all in your hands. Choose." Ningshu couldn't help but bitterly smile inside. It's all in her hands. If she really had the right to choose, could she not choose any cup and just turn around and leave? The answer was naturally no. Therefore this so-called, "it was all in her hands" was nothing more than a joke. Before, she could still hope for Xiahou Qing, but this time, the Empress had clearly cut off all her hopes. She looked down at the 2 cups of wine that looked identical. Her back was covered in a chill. The same wine cup, the same color, and even the smell were the same. She had no choice. And her life and death was tied to these 2 cups of wine. Ningshu slowly exhaled from the bottom of her heart. She bowed and said, "This girl has decided. This girl will not guess which cup, and will allow Empress to bestow the wine." This unexpected answer caused Empress Chao to raise an eyebrow. She curled her lips and said coldly, "If Ben Gong makes a choice for you, then you will definitely die. You don't even want this 50-50 chance?" Ning Shu raised her head and said word by word in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing, "If Empress really wants to kill me, then no matter which cup I choose, I will not be able to escape. So this girl will not guess, and there is no need to guess. But Empress, this girl does not understand one thing. This girl has not offended you, so why do you want this girl's life? Please let Ning Shu die knowing the truth." Empress Chao laughed. Her laughter was particularly clear and loud in this spacious and empty palace. "Smart, you are indeed very smart. That's right, these 2 cups of wine have been poisoned by me. No matter which cup you choose, you are destined to die on the spot." Ning Shu didn't feel the slightest bit lucky that she managed to save her life. Instead, it made her even more frightened. It seemed that Empress Chao really wanted to kill her today. What should she do? What to do? Empress Chao bent down and looked down at Ning Shu. Her eyes were as gentle and magnanimous as ever, and there was even a hint of pity in them. "You're right. You didn't offend me. You could even say that you helped me solve the Phoenix Terrace case and made a great contribution. Besides, you're smart enough to know what to say and what not to say. To be fair, you even look a little similar to this consort when she was younger. Whenever this consort sees you, it often reminds this consort of herself from back then. If I could easily erase you from this world, it would be a bit of a pity. It's a pity that the one who wants you dead this time isn't anyone else, but His Majesty. There's really nothing I can do." After saying this, Empress Chao sighed regretfully and waved her hand. The palace maid holding the poisoned wine took a step forward and raised the 2 cups of poisoned wine even higher, bringing it to Ning Shu's eyes. "Lady Ning, please. You have to thank the Empress for being merciful and leaving you with an intact corpse." Ning Shu clenched her fists tightly and looked at the thing in front of her without moving. Her mind spun furiously as she tried to think of a way to save her little life. But her mind was empty. There was nothing. It was as if she had been forced to a dead end, and had one foot on the edge of a cliff. There was no way to retreat. The only thing she could do was accept her fate. "It seems that your eldest miss refuses a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Then this servant can only serve you." The palace maid sneered and gave a look to the side. Another palace maid immediately came forward, and prepared to suppress Ning Shu and force the wine into her mouth. These 2 people were clearly skilled in martial arts. Ning Shu's 3-legged cat was completely powerless in front of them. The wine cup was about to touch her lips. In that instant, Ning Shu suddenly thought of a solution and said loudly, "Has Empress not thought of a problem? This subject's daughter is only an insignificant person. If His Majesty wants this subject's death, it's only a matter of a word. Why does His Majesty want Empress to do it for him?" Chapter 243. Her heart thumped and her body froze like a rock. Ning Shu ordered herself to raise her head and look at Empress Chao with the most fervent gaze, looking at her last sliver of life. She had died 7 times before, so death was nothing out of the ordinary for her. But in this life it was too rare. This once-in-a-thousand-years opportunity allowed her to return to the starting point. She hadn't been able to prevent Duke Ning's tragedy, nor had she been able to help Xiaoqing solve the mystery of the plum blossom kiss. She hadn't had time to change anything. She wouldn't allow herself to die so easily. Absolutely not. The palace maid next to her laughed and said, "Why did His Majesty ask Her Highness to do it for him? Isn't this a simple question?" "Because His Majesty trusts Her Highness." Ning Shu raised her eyebrows and curled her lips. She said in a mysterious tone, "Is it really just trust? My daughter doesn't think so." The palace maid frowned, thinking that she had seen through her trick. "Then what else could it be? I think it's just that you're about to die, but you're still trying to use your glib tongue to make a last-ditch struggle. You're overestimating yourself." At this moment, Ning Shu no longer had any fear. She smiled coldly. "Perhaps my daughter is overestimating herself. But after my death, Her Highness might not know the real reason." Empress Chao, who was sitting on the high floor, raised her eyes to admire her obvious performance. It was as if she was looking at an insignificant ant. She snorted and said with disdain, "You want to trick Ben Gong with such a clumsy method of provocation?" Meeting her cold gaze, Ningshu's eyes seemed to be burning with fire. "Her Highness is wise. Naturally, you can see through my daughter's goal. But in any case, my daughter is going to die. It's only a matter of time before she dies. It will only delay Her Highness a little bit. What is there to be concerned about? Or is it that Her Highness doesn't dare to listen?" At this moment, she had changed from her previous respectful and timid appearance. She was showing off her ability, which made Empress Chao a little interested. The corners of Empress Chao's mouth lifted slightly. She looked at her coldly and didn't say anything for a long time. It wasn't until Ningshu's heartbeat reached its peak that she finally raised her hand and ordered the eunuchs. "Kai Bin, let her go first. I would like to hear what kind of flower her silver tongue will bloom." Ningshu finally grasped the thread that was hanging on her little life. She rubbed her wrist that was hurting from being pinched and exhaled silently. She pushed aside the 2 palace servants who had almost killed her just now and walked past the 2 wine cups filled with poison. She slowly walked to the bottom of the stairs closest to Empress Chao. She constantly recalled the tone of Xia Hoqing's voice and then imitated it. Unhurriedly, she said, "Because His Majesty wanted to use me to test Empress." Her words made Empress Chao narrow her eyes, but there was a bone-piercing coldness in her eyes. What a joke. Why would His Majesty test this Empress for no reason? If it was any other time, Ningshu would have immediately knelt down and begged for forgiveness. However, she clearly knew that this move was useless today. The only thing she could do was to use her sharpness to pierce the core. Because whether it is the case of Phoenix Terrace or the case of the cursed horoscope, the one who benefits in the end is none other than you, Her Highness. As expected, Empress Chao was successfully infuriated by her. She slapped the armrest of the Phoenix throne with her hand that was wearing exquisite armor. Empress Chao's low and angry roar pierced through the spacious Phoenix Algae Palace. "How dare you? You want to drive a wedge between His Majesty and this Empress? Someone, immediately poison this Ningshu who is spreading lies to deceive the public." Chapter 244. Before the 2 palace servants could rush over to capture Ningshu again, she had already raised her hand and raised her sleeve. If Ningshu was speaking nonsense, why is Nyang so angry? Your reaction just now, doesn't it mean that Ningshu's words are reasonable? 25 years. In the 25 years since Empress Chao had ascended to the position of Empress, other than the death of the eldest prince, no one in the palace had ever seen the Empress lose her composure like this. Kai Bing thought that the daring Ningshu would definitely die this time. Perhaps she would die even more tragically than before. However, she never thought that after Ningshu finished speaking, Empress Chao would look at her deeply. It was like she wanted to see through her thin shell and dig out her exquisite heart. Silence. A deathly silence. As if realizing her momentary loss of composure, Empress Chao pulled back the jade hand that had been on the armrest. In a low voice she said, "Kai Bing, stay. Everyone else, get out of this palace." The palace servants froze for a moment before bowing and retreating. The cinnabar and gold doors were opened and closed. Only a gust of wind came in, allowing Ningshu to catch her breath. "If you want to speak, then this palace will give you the chance to speak. However, you must speak carefully. If you don't speak well, then it won't just be your little life. This palace will have the entire Duke Ning buried with you." A drop of sweat silently slid down her chin and fell to the ground. Ningshu calmly replied with a yes. Then she slowly began to speak her mind. "In the case of Phoenix Terrace, my daughter boldly exposed Consort and Wen Yang's true identity. At the same time, she exposed the third prince's actions to the public. This caused the third prince to be demoted to a commoner and later executed. Of course, this was his own fate. It had nothing to do with Nyang. Consort Wen was a brothel girl. Although she was pregnant with a dragon's heir, she deserved to die for deceiving the monarch. In the end, he killed himself and did not deserve any sympathy. Thus, in the previous case, 3 people died one after another. They were the eldest prince, Xiao Yunyan, Zhou Yuzhao, who was disguised as Consort Wen, and the unborn dragon fetus in her womb. If only this case was closed, His Majesty might not be suspicious of you. But coincidentally, in the case of the cursed horoscope, concubine Qi's niece, Qi Zhanyu, died, and concubine Qi became insane because of it, and Ningxu paused for a moment before continuing. It's some kind of unknown poison. Although His Majesty took pity on her and promoted her to noble consort. A crazy noble consort is of no use to the fourth prince. Instead, it's equivalent to cutting off one of his arms. When Empress Chao heard her words, she immediately interrupted. The cursed 8 characters case has nothing to do with me. Her subconscious response revealed a message that she was indeed involved in the Phoenix Terrace case. However, Ningxu clearly understood that when it was time to pretend to be deaf and dumb, she should pretend to be deaf and dumb. Thus she nodded and said, yes. In this case, Her Majesty did not participate much from beginning to end. Even that day, the Weiyang Palace's selection of heir consort was ordered by His Majesty. You were just following His Majesty's orders. That's why I said it was a coincidence. These 2 cases that happen one after another seem to be accidents that were caused by insignificant matters and had nothing to do with you. However, in His Majesty's eyes, these dead and injured people all had one thing in common. They were all thorns in His Majesty's side. Especially in His Majesty's heart. These 2 cases were imperceptibly related to the fight for the throne in the future. The third prince was demoted to a commoner and lost the right to fight for the throne. This was without a doubt the first. Consort Nguyen was pregnant with His Majesty's most anticipated child at the time, but this child died with its mother before it was born. He was His Majesty's only son in recent years. Although His Majesty did not say it, it was still a hidden pain in his heart. This was the second. After losing noble consort Qi's guidance, the fourth prince, Xiao Yunsu, was impetuous and arrogant. He would definitely gradually lose the hearts of the court officials. This was the third. Then, after these 3 strong opponents fell, who was the next in line? Naturally, it was the 6th prince you raised, Xiao Yuni. So Her Majesty, if these 2 cases were not done by you, then who was it? And I, Ningxu, who participated in these 2 cases and exposed the truth, only have one identity in His Majesty's heart. Your accomplice. Chapter 245. Ningxu's 2 sentences, one subdued the other, raised the other. The first sentence almost aroused Empress Chao's thunderous rage, but the second sentence promptly placed herself in the same camp as Empress Chao, pulling back the dangerous situation. Saying so much in one breath caused her lungs to ache slightly due to the lack of oxygen. However, she didn't have time to stop for a moment, because her life depended on this moment. She took a deep breath and finished her unfinished words. This subject and Nyang Nyang both know that this is all a misunderstanding on His Majesty's part. However, the so-called truth is often not what actually happened, but what people are willing to believe. And the truth in His Majesty's heart seems to be different from Nyang Nyang's. The last sentence was simply a heart-rending words, causing Empress Chao's expression to suddenly change. Her gaze deeply pierced Ningxu's body, the depths of her eyes surging with gloomy contemplation. Every strand of contemplation hid the shadow of a sword and the light of a knife. Her back had long been soaked with a layer of cold sweat, causing her entire body to feel cold. However, Ningxu knew that if she showed the slightest bit of timidity or lack of confidence, she would completely lose this game of chess. Because in front of an absolute powerhouse, there was no room for a good-for-nothing. Thus, she straightened her back and quietly welcomed Empress Chao's scrutiny. She was like a green lotus that had just emerged from the water, neither creeping nor branching, graceful and pure. Empress Chao finally stood up and slowly walked up the high platform step by step towards her. She laughed mockingly. So, in order to wash away the suspicion on me, Ben Gong should instead kill you. This subject doesn't think so. Because in this world, there is something called the seed of doubt. Ningxu's voice was like a vine, seemingly soft but full of tenacity. It invisibly spread throughout the entire palace. She softly said, "This kind of thing is soundless and formless, but it is the most terrifying thing in the world. Because once it is born, no matter how much you swear to the heavens or do your best to prove it, in the eyes of doubters, it will become evidence that you are trying to hide. In Nyang's eyes, killing my daughter is to express your sincerity to His Majesty, but in His Majesty's eyes, would it be to silence her? As for whether it is the former or the latter, Your Highness has spent nearly 30 years by His Majesty's side. Your heart should be 10,000 times clearer than my daughter's. Finally, Empress Chow walked in front of her. Her high hair bun was adorned with 9 phoenix hairpins that symbolized the power of the phoenix. Each feather was lifelike and as sharp as a blade, making her look graceful and inviolable. She lowered her eyes and her gaze slid down from Ning Shu's face to her shoulders before sweeping over her body. According to what you've said, it's wrong for this consort to kill you, but it's also wrong for this consort not to kill you. Instead, it's this consort's turn to be helpless. In order to save your little life, you really did your best. Under this kind of oppressive gaze, Ning Shu slightly bowed as a form of greeting. Nyang is too kind. Even an ant would struggle to survive, let alone a person made of flesh and blood. However, my daughter is even more clear that if I don't have the ability to satisfy Nyang, even if I can use my glib tongue to temporarily save my life, I will definitely die in the future. The words she had said today, no matter which one was picked out, would be considered disgraceful. It would be like handing the other party a knife to stab at her. But she had no other choice. She could only take the risk and rely on these heart-wrenching words to surrender to the Empress. She wanted to see if she could move this Empress who looked gentle, but was actually cold-blooded. Ning Shu had thoroughly tasted the feeling of a day passing like a year today. It seemed like a long time had passed, but it also seemed like an instant. The Empress finally finished looking over Ning Shu. She turned around and returned to her phoenix seat. She supported her chin with her hand and softly said, "You girl, you've thought things through more thoroughly than I have. Then, in your opinion, how should this consort's current predicament be resolved?" The turning point she had been waiting for had finally arrived. Ning Shu's heart fell back into her chest, and she tightly clenched her fists under her sleeves. She had made the right bet. She had guessed correctly. Although Empress Chow and His Majesty had been husband and wife for nearly 30 years, and seemed to be harmonious and close, in reality, they were already riddled with holes. While His Majesty was suspicious of Empress Chow also had disloyalty in her heart. Otherwise, how could wave after wave of His Majesty's favored concubines silently disappear in the harem for so many years? How did His Majesty's young princes, who were waiting to be born or just born, die? No matter how meticulously the Empress took care of it, it could not change the fact that His Majesty had not taken the initiative to step into the Phoenix Algae Palace for 10 years except on the first day of each month. As the saying went, there were no husband and wife in the royal family. This was probably the case. There was only the struggle for power and scheming against each other. As for that thin layer of friendship, it was like a piece of cotton paper stuck to the window lattice, easily broken with a light poke. Just like her and Xiao Yuni, who had turned against each other and became enemies in that life. Chapter 246. Ning Shu said sincerely, "Many thanks for your Highness' trust. This humble girl believes that there is only one way to dispel His Majesty's current suspicions, and that is to ask your Highness and His Highness the Sixth Prince to conceal their strength and bide their time." How do we conceal our strength and bide our time? For example, your Highness can apply for medical leave and leave the harem in the care of the grand concubines. Another example is that His Highness the Sixth Prince recently obtained the authority to command 30,000 Yongchengwei. Ning Shu carefully observed every subtle expression on Empress Chow's face and hurriedly explained. This humble girl naturally knows that this authority was not easily obtained, and that His Highness the Sixth Prince used his life to obtain it. It would be a pity to give it up so easily. However, your Highness must know that there is a move called retreating in order to advance. Temporarily retreating now is for the sake of pursuing victory in the future. Moreover, His Majesty's birthday is approaching. His Highness the Sixth Prince can use the excuse of congratulating His Majesty on his birthday to take the initiative to hand over his authority, and go to the ancestral temple to copy scriptures. This way, not only will you fully express your attitude to His Majesty, But you will also expose His Highness the Sixth Prince's filial piety to His Majesty. When His Majesty's suspicions about your Highness and His Highness the Sixth Prince are completely eliminated, why worry about Yang Qingwei not returning to His Highness the Sixth Prince's hands? Perhaps, you will also receive unexpected compensation from His Majesty. It sounds absurd, but it does make some sense. Empress Chao thought about it for a moment. It was clear that she had taken Ji Yunshu's words to heart. A moment later, she turned her gaze back to Ji Yunshu. Her sharp armor slowly tapped on the armrest a few times. But, how should this Empress deal with you? If I let you safely leave my Phoenix Algae Palace, wouldn't this consort be violating His Majesty's orders? As expected, she still couldn't escape this Dao tribulation. Ningxu bitterly smiled, then bent down and knelt in front of Empress Chao. This subject's name is Ningxu. This subject's name is Ningxu. This subject's name is audacious and arrogant, openly disrespecting the Empress. Furthermore, this subject's wine has been knocked over by the Empress. I ask the Empress to throw this subject's name into prison as a warning to others. The feeling of fabricating a crime for herself was truly a subtle one. However, compared to losing his life, there was at least a chance of survival in prison. The knocking stopped abruptly and Empress Chao's face regained its graceful and kind smile. She sighed slightly and said, "Since that's the case, then this Empress can only agree to your request. Don't worry if your usefulness is proven. This consort won't let you die so easily. You can stay in prison for a while." Ningxu silently kowtowed. "Thank you, Empress, for your mercy." The tightly shut door made a creaking sound as it slowly opened behind her. A wisp of cold wind entered the oppressive hall, brushing against her back that was already soaked in sweat, causing her to shiver all of a sudden. Looking at the bright light that slipped into the hall at the same time as the cool wind, Ningxu couldn't help but feel deeply moved. Before she entered the palace, she had repeatedly promised her mother that she would return home safely. Unexpectedly, not only had she broken her promise, she had also become a prisoner. How was she going to explain this? Ningxu, Ningxu, ever since you were reborn, everything you've experienced has been too smooth, making you unconsciously blindly confident. It's good to learn a lesson this time. As she comforted herself in her heart and prepared to leave, she heard Empress Chao's deep and unfathomable voice again. "How much do you know about the plum blossom kiss?" Ningxu's figure suddenly paused, but she reacted quickly and immediately knelt down again. She said with sincerity, "This subject's daughter doesn't know much. This subject's daughter only accidentally saw a few words in the case records left behind by my late master. It said that this poison is colorless and odorless, and is the most terrifying poison in the world. It seems that as the poison deepens, it will grow into a shape similar to a flower. It is very strange. Other than this subject's daughter doesn't know anything else." When she finally walked out of the Phoenix Algae Palace, Ningxu's vision darkened, and she almost couldn't keep her feet steady, because twice, in that extravagant and cold palace, she had almost brushed shoulders with the King of Hell twice. Chapter 247. The palace servants guarding outside the hall could not guess the great waves in her heart at this moment. They were all shocked at what kind of magic this Lady Ning had to be able to escape death from the Empress again. She could be considered a strange person. However, this strange man still ended up in prison. The palace servants sighed as they tied up Ningxu and sent her to prison. In the past 7 lifetimes, she had been an animal, a beggar, skinned alive, and suffered from the cold and hunger. Even in the 7th lifetime, she had been thrown out as bait by Xiao Yunyi's reincarnation. Before it was her turn to go to jail, she had already been cut into 1,000 pieces and executed on the spot. So for Ningxu, the experience of being in prison was really the first time a girl had entered a bridal sedan chair. It was very refreshing. The air of the Ministry of Justice's prison was filled with the smell of blood all year round. This nauseating smell had already seeped into the texture of every wall in this prison, and could not be washed away. Passing through one rusty iron door after another, Ningxu was pushed into the deepest cell in the prison with shackles on. The iron lock was ruthlessly locked. Ningshu looked around and immediately smiled bitterly, because her neighbor was none other than her old friend, the former third prince Xiao Yunyan. This treatment was so high that the old men of the Ministry of Justice thought too highly of her. Now there was something to reminisce about. As expected, Xiao Yunyan, who had been sitting with his back to the prison door, when he found that the new neighbor was her, his fighting spirit was aroused. With a bang, he pounced at her and tightly grabbed the iron bar separating them. He angrily cursed, "It's you. You bitch. It's you who ruined everything for me. I'm going to strangle you to death. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to tear you to pieces." Facing the neighbor's overly enthusiastic greeting, Ningshu politely declined and distanced herself. She shook her wrist that was in pain from the shackles and slowly said, "How does the third prince want my daughter to die? It's better to think about it first before making a decision. After all, my daughter only has one life. Take your time to think about it. My daughter is tired and will rest for a while. Later, I will accompany you to reminisce." Xiao Yunyan was so angry that he almost vomited blood. The jailer originally wanted to stay and watch the show. There had been all kinds of people in the prison of the Ministry of Justice. There were robbers who killed people like Scything Flax, and there were also relatives of the emperor who offended the emperor. Most of them were either disheartened or scolded crazily after coming in. There were also some who couldn't bear the despair in their hearts and silently hanged themselves with a belt. It was really boring to see too many of them. It was rare to see such a beautiful woman, and he was waiting to see how this beauty would turn pale and sob in fear. He didn't expect that although she looked delicate, she was actually more valiant than those outlaws who killed and robbed. She actually yawned unhurriedly, and then chose a relatively clean haystack to lie down and make up for her interrupted afternoon nap. He was quite a character. The jailer quickly made a judgment in his heart. He decided that it was best not to provoke this rumored Lady Ning. Less than an hour later, in the background of Xiao Yunyan's hoarse cursing, Ningshu finally recovered enough energy to open her eyes. She looked at the only small window in the cell that could be ventilated. Based on the intensity of the light, she roughly estimated the time. Ever since she came out of the Phoenix Algae Palace, the news that she had been locked in the prison of the Ministry of Justice should have already reached the Fu. Father must be anxiously thinking of a way to save her. She didn't know if her mother's weak body had been stimulated by the news. In addition, Xia Hoqing was very well informed. Nothing that happened in the capital could escape his ears, so he should have begun to act. For some reason, she and Xia Hoqing had only known each other for a little more than a month, but she was inexplicably certain that Xia Hoqing would not sit by and watch her fall into trouble. Absolutely not. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.